Well, at the end of Dynamite tonight, Tej, we had eventful closing segment for a match that I don't think was a primary. It should have been in certain ways because it involves a world champion, but I think it was a primary match on most people's minds when they were thinking about this event coming up on Saturday. That in and of itself is a bit of a mystery. People are trying to figure out: is it a amped up collision? Is it a free pay-per-view? Is it a double-length battle of the belts? It's hard to kind of fully define what we've got going here. But I think this match needed something, and we got Copeland being Copeland. We had Spike and the coming out of the whatever metal case that it was in. He's trying to break open the other case that Mox had the belt in, and then big brawl. And then we get Mox in the course of all of this agreeing to give Copeland the title shot he wants at Revolution because he's going to break his neck. And that's the way he can get him in the ring. Although he'll have his chance on Saturday. Maybe it was a premature gift, but if he can break his neck Saturday, it's sort of a moot point. So yeah, Jay White and Copeland out there getting a big brawl with Death Riders. What'd you think of that as a show closing angle and the final message to fans telling them tune in Saturday night?
I think that, ending with a confirmed match for Revolution was a unique way to end a go-home show for another event. Simply because, because of all the mystery around Grand Slam, there's a lot of polarizing opinions on it going in. Frankly, I thought that they would have waited to kind of gauge the fallout from Grand Slam to establish what the road to Revolution would look like. That being said, I think that this go-home angle itself was very, very well executed. It had a hot crowd behind it, which elevates AEW more than I think hot crowds elevate any other promotion. I think that Mox versus Cope is an incredible kind of marquee headliner match for Revolution. Both of them have more mainstream recognition than most people in the company, and that is going to be a great kind of base for other feuds to build themselves on for an incredibly stacked pay-per-view card. I am biased because I want this card to be good. It's in my my backyard of Los Angeles, California, but the hype is beginning to build, and I wasn't sure that it would this early.
Tell me about if you think there's been a change in Moxley's heel character and mission and persona over the last few weeks. Some people have been observing there's a little less talk about, there's still some of that and it's somewhat recent, but a little less talk about, I need these young guys to stop, what wrestlers were saying 20 years and Jim Ross was saying 20 years ago. These guys need to stop playing video games in the back and get drunk and play poker. Whatever the message was that wrestlers were supposed to be in 2005 that people were lamenting they weren't anymore. And obviously that's not Mox's message, but he is a more serious, less parody version of it, which is, let's take this more seriously than you are. And it's making him very angry that he feels he's the only one who's taking wrestling seriously, and we're supposed to boo that notion. That's a whole other thing. But I can't bring this up without talking about that. But it seems like it's shifted a bit now, Tej, to a more traditional heel. He's selling in the corner for Copeland. He's only getting advantages when there's a double team. There's distractions. The goal of a heel, not solely, but primarily most of the time, is get your babyface over, because that's where the heat comes from as a heel, is if you set something up for the babyface to overcome, and you do so in a way where the fans want to see the babyface knock you down. And we see that with Hangman and MJF working, I think, effectively on this show, which we'll talk about. We're seeing more of that with Mox, a more traditional heel role than we've seen since his alliance with Bryan Danielson, and now the new group that followed that. And so I think it's good timing, because honestly, Copeland needed it. He needs Mox to be less cool, and he needs to give fans a reason. Mox is in charge of giving fans a reason to get behind Copeland, because Copeland is a damaged, somewhat flat legend that AEW brought in. So kind of your thoughts on my framing of it, and primarily Moxley, but we can get into Copeland too, and if this feud or the build to this match has helped Copeland recover a little bit from what felt like a rough spot he was in.
Absolutely. So from the very beginning, I've been more on board with the Death Riders gimmick than most people have. I think the concept of a heel that is genuinely invested in the promotion, wants it to be better, and has grown angry about, the state that it's in, it's a double-edged sword because you are inherently ragging on what AEW is. But I thought that, that concept on its own was interesting and a positive, and it fit in line with the Mox character both in and out of kayfabe. However, I thought the execution in the early days was flawed because when you try and paint the Death Riders as this all-encompassing force that are just so much better than everyone else on the roster, there were a lot of early opening vignettes on Dynamite where you had this crowd of jobbers and mid-card guys waiting for the Death Riders to come in at the entrance. It doesn't really work for a few reasons. Number one, the Death Riders are just 5 people. As badass as Marina Shafir is, as badass as Claudia Bailey is, they're in a promotion that also has Powerhouse Hobbs, Chris Statlander, and Megan Bay. You just can't plausibly say that these 5 guys are so far ahead of everyone else that you can buy them as the end boss. Secondary, when you essentially state that your enemies are the entire rest of the company, then as a booker, Tony Khan has 2 choices. Number one, he can either do what he did, which is paint them as a traditional heel and have enemies and have their babyface opponents kind of pick and choose when to go after them. But then, of course, structurally, it starts to fall apart logically because why are these main event players like Swerve or MJF not more outwardly focused on this incredibly dominant threat? Now, the opposite, which is what a lot of people thought was going to happen, is you have almost every babyface on the roster teaming up against the Death Riders. Structurally, that just doesn't really make sense to run an entire promotion around because there's only so much mileage you can get out of one big feud, which is a big reason why WCW in the immediate aftermath of the NWO, it was a tough wash if you weren't into the NWO because so much of the show was dominated by the commentators just blabbing about the NWO, even if, there was a mid-card match with 2 people who had nothing to do with the heel group. So I think that kind of slowing them down and sequestering them to just a heel group that wants everyone else to be as dedicated as they are was a good choice. Mox doesn't have to worry about being a Thanos-level supervillain. He can be what he authentically is, which is a down-to-earth, tough guy that is disgusted when people get distracted and take their eye off the ball. I think we're seeing the most focused version of Mox that we have so far. And obviously Copeland has the pedigree to believably be a threat to Mox, introducing some vulnerability, which is always good, not just for booking, but also for, increasing the nuance behind a character. Seeing Mox as vulnerable, as able to be hurt, increases our investment because it doesn't just feel like it's a babyface just throwing something at him and nothing happens.
So a couple things. We'll start with this. What is the reason AEW fans should be rallying around Adam Copeland and rooting against Jon Moxley right now? What story has AEW told effectively or clumsily? And that you can frame it however you want, but obviously that's what they're going for. They want fans to cheer Copeland. Everything is pointed that way. Everything other than Moxley's mission statement has been heelish, throughout this. So what's working in that regard, or at least what is their goal, and how can they achieve it better based on what they've attempted so far?
I mean, it definitely feels like the end goal behind the Death Rider storyline is to leave every division better than they found it. It provides a conceivable...
Why would anyone boo that? No, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm serious. I'm posing the question to you: why would fans root for Copeland and against Moxley? And you just said they'd root for Copeland because the Death Riders are going to leave every division better off. Just clarify, because I know you mean something by that. I just want to be. Have you? Yeah. Everyone.
I mean, out of kayfabe. It feels like the booking team's intention behind the. I'm getting
okay,
to the story.
I'll be more. I was thinking of the listeners going, wait a second, that seems the opposite of what Wade asked. So I'll be patient.
Yeah,
listeners, you too.
So it feels like the intention of the Death Rider storyline out of kayfabe is to leave every division better than they found it by providing these end bosses across every division for, you know, baby faces to conceivably rise against, in the same way that in other promotions you have like the big bad heel holding the world championship. It's something that everyone's striving for, and it plants the idea in the viewer's mind, okay, this is all right, we're seeing this person authentically get over, rise up the card. Okay, now we immediately think, all right, there's Mox could work against this guy, whatever. It feels like, you know, the storyline that AEW is trying to go for here is Mox's intentions are noble, but his methods are evil and villainous. We've seen him brutalize people. We've seen him, you know, just deny the babyface. Yeah, as you know, Zach Barber just replied in the chat, because Mox is trying to cripple people. Sorry for the all caps, but it feels like that keeps getting overlooked. Exactly. He's willing to put people on the shelf and, you know, within kayfabe, ruin their livelihood, injure them potentially for life, all in the name of this mission. While, you know, a noble intent, he is not a good person. And it feels like, you know, Copeland, what we saw in the closing moments of Dynamite, he said, "You think I don't care? I do care, same as you. But what you're doing is just not the way to go about this." You know, it's, and I think that, you know, in AEW's style of storytelling, where it's less dependent, for better or for worse, on, you know, an inherently evil motivation versus an inherently good motivation. You have two guys that want the same thing, but they fundamentally disagree on each other's approaches. And I think that's where the AEW hardcore audience, which again, for better or for worse, that is who the booking team's still catering to. That's enough for people to root for Copeland. Plus, you know, Copeland's just inherent likability. That's my take on it.
Yeah. No. I got an answer I was looking for. So, you extracted from Copeland going, "I care about the championship too." The idea that that's a broader statement that goes back to Moxley's original mission statement, which is the championship represents this company. I care about the company. The guys in the back are partying, they're celebrating, they're acting about that they've accomplished something, they have it. What, you know, all the stuff he said. Because my question was going to be, before you said that, when have the announcers ever said what you just said, which is his mission is noble, but his means of achieving it are heinous and out of line and all of that. I mean, he did try to kill Bryan Danielson in front of our very eyes, and then just showed up to work and keeps collecting paychecks. Tony Khan keeps letting him in the building. It's hard for me to get past that. It's so stupid. But so it just is. I mean, like, it's fourth grade. It's fourth graders going, "Wouldn't it be cool if we did that?" with no thought about what happens next. And no adult in the room going, "Wait, let's talk this through a little bit." So, but that aside, because we have to go on in life and to go on in a podcast, we have to set that aside. The lapse in judgment and the hot shotting. So why have the announcers not said that? Why have the opponents of Moxley, i.e. the baby faces in quote marks, why haven't they said that more often or at all until this notion that the belt in that promo symbolized everything Moxley stands for, and Copeland is saying, "I care about it too." And we'll get to David Bryan's point in the chat in a moment, which is, "I care about it so much I'm going to destroy it by bashing this briefcase over and over and wreck it." But that's a little bit of a sidebar, but it's more funny than disqualifying of this. So my issue with this is, from the second Moxley cut the promo, the announcers needed to say, ideally, the person who Excalibur ought to be should have become a human being in his commentary with emotions that connect to the audience, going, "I like testify to it." You know what? A lot of people agree with things that Moxley is saying. There has been in immaturity at times in the locker room. There have been people who have been distracted by social media posts and going out there and worrying not about a championship and representing this company, but how many likes and followers they get. That is a frustration a lot of people like old timers like Moxley feel. And you know what? Guilty. There's some people who fans are cheering who irked Moxley because see, you don't even have to go that far, but you could, because you almost have to have that fundamental understanding of what Moxley's talking about for this to work. So maybe bring everybody in on it and don't talk in code. But then you own it, kind of like Gunther owned Jey Uso is not an opponent who's going to raise my profile as a WrestleMania opponent. I already beat him. He's not a top guy. Own it, because that's what everybody's thinking. So own the notion that Moxley's got a point, but then turn him heel by saying a lot of people have good points, but everybody resents them for being right because of the way they go about trying to prove their point. They've never said that. It's just sort of floated out there, and it's been up to us to try to like point out over and over in all caps sometimes, tell the story Moxley's intending to tell. He's cutting a promo. None of the support group around him in this company, the baby faces or the announcers, are emphasizing that point and doing their part to make this work until tonight, sort of, with the belt symbolizing Moxley's message. So do you think there's a point there, or Tej, talk about that?
No, I completely agree with you. I think that that's one of the biggest flaws in AEW is the announcers kind of being left to their own devices and calling the match strictly as a sport, which is great for me stylistically. It's the kind of style that I love, but it de-emphasizes a lot of these story beats in an era of professional wrestling across all promotions where the bar for storytelling is significantly being raised, and it leads a lot of people, erroneously or otherwise, to miss certain points of a story, even if they are being told. They're just invisible to a lot of people because, you know, they're not being pointed out, and not everyone is willing to parse through every single thing with a fine-tooth comb. If I wanted to be charitable, I would say that up until now, the focus has been more on establishing the Death Riders as a gimmick and as a villainous force, and only now that they've been ensconced in the world of AEW can we focus on cracking down their motivations. Cope is, you know, one of the first big verbal feuds that Mox has had in a little while, and on the road to Revolution. I would, if I was a betting man, say that they would get into more of the ideological battles like on the mic. But again, that's giving AEW a lot of credit when it feels like simply just a bug in a lot of their more story-heavy angles that don't revolve around old-school fighting spirit, sportsmanship, etc.
Yep. Okay. We can continue this discussion. I certainly can, and we can make more points. We can talk about other aspects of the angle too. This is a recurring theme with the Death Riders. My opening framing of it is I think there's been a pivot or an adjustment in the presentation of Moxley's character that is realizing it needs to be a little more heelish, even if he believes he's noble in his message. There's still, as I would say is often the case over the last 6 years in AEW, some really good announcing in certain ways, but it's missing, you know, it's like having a partner in life. They might be a great cook. They might help clean the house really well. They might provide money. They might provide support when you're sick, but there can be some emotional connection that just is missing, and it makes it, you know, more of a roommate situation or a practical instead of passionate. I feel that's the announcers. I mean, I don't think Excalibur, he checks a lot of boxes. He knows the names of moves. He's genuinely excited. He's genuinely a fan. He knows history. But when he talks, I never feel it. And I don't think he feels anything when he announces. At least his announcing style is such that it's in such a narrow range that if he feels it, he's suppressing it because he wants to sound like an announcer who's talking like he's just reading a script for a TV commercial. And that this is an angle that calls for someone breaking out of that shell and showing more range and representing the brand. We've seen ideally it'd be a baby face too, but the announcer is a big part of it. He's the voice of the brand. I don't think there's any ill intent on his part. I think he could be coached out of it and be better. I don't know if he'll ever be great at it. It might not be his strength. I don't think it would, you know, anyway. So when you do an angle like this, if you're Moxley, and you've got to make sure everybody else is on board supporting it, and that there's a storyboard and a timeline to do it. I don't buy the notion that it took all this time to establish how mean he is before we get around to explaining why we should boo him. Even though his mission is noble, I think that's a terribly flawed storyline and frankly excuse making for a company that did not execute this angle anywhere near as well as it needed to. And I think that's self-evident.
I agree. That was me. If I really wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, I don't. I think that this angle has been very, very flawed. I think it still has a lot of potential, but it definitely feels like, you know, they've wasted a lot of time and burned through almost all the audience goodwill to get to this point for things to pick up. Because I remember when the Death Riders were announced in the immediate aftermath of All Out, there was a lot of enthusiasm. People thought that Mox is like this big evil heel champ was going to be incredible. And, you know, it was like kind of interesting, the sheer adrenaline of all these people stepping up to Mox and Claudio and Yuta's indecision. And then all that just kind of fell by the wayside for a couple of months. And, you know, we could talk about intent and what things were, but at the end of the day, it just swung a little bit too far in one direction.
Yeah. And Moxley's just too damn talented, too damn valuable. And he has this big vision for what he wants to do. And he had a big idea, but I don't think it was a complete idea, and I don't think it's execution. The support around it to make it work was there. And you know, when it's this big of a story arc and there's so many flaws in it, mid-card babyface is standing outside the arena, and it's like, man, and then you just expect like they're going to have support within a week or two. It's going to be everybody, including some heels joining them to go, you're not going to, what you say isn't true, you're exaggerating, you're delusional, you're whatever, you know, like, yes, there's a few cases of that, but that's not all of us, and those people are gone now. I mean, you could have really defended AEW and stood up to them, but that had happened in the first 3-4 weeks because it was like, we're going to stand outside and not let you in the building, and then that got completely forgotten about, sort of like the Young Bucks booking the show. Like, it just, well, we decided that the pace of it, the idea was bad, or the pace of it is going to be different. So, yeah, it's too big of a story. There's too much talent involved to just sort of go, well, it's good enough because they're beating each other up and it's chaotic. And that's about all they've been able to sell. Okay, let's pause. Let's introduce the show, introduce ourselves. And I want to read some chat room comments that have been posted as we've been talking. You referenced one of them. I'll get to others. And then we'll talk about other stuff, including we had Harley Cameron's rap music video. We had Mariah May responding to Tony Storm. And, well, whatever. I mean, plenty of stuff. We didn't have... kind of tied for the top match on this event, I would argue, is Ospreay and Omega against the Callis family. Didn't get much there. We did get my wish of Cage and Archer stepping out as a tag team, going after the tag belts. I've been talking about that, including on Tuesday's show, and there they go. Great minds think alike. We'll say. All right. This is a Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. I'm Wade Keller, and we are live right after AEW Dynamite, which was not live. It was taped last night, by the way. We've had results up on PWTorch.com from Brian Zillum, who attended in person all day. He'll be joining us later, by the way, to talk about the in-arena experience and the crowd reactions, which would be interesting to get his viewpoint on things and some off-air happenings, and if things went smoothly at the tapings and how the TV show compared to the live experience, all that kind of stuff. So that's coming up in a bit. PWTorch contributor Brian Zillum attended. But we are live talking about tonight's show. We focused on the show closing angle so far, and the other voice you hear on the podcast side of things and on YouTube, the other voice and face you see is Taj Narayanan. He is a PWTorch.com contributor and frequent co-host, although this is his first time talking AEW, and I've been excited about this, having you on to talk AEW. I know that you are, because you've said AEW is the brand you would favor analyzing more often than WWE. I'll just put it that way. Or you're eager to talk about it in this format. So it's great to have you on, and it's great to press you on some points of view and I think extract some good analysis in terms of where you're coming from and our thoughts on a big story arc right now headlining tonight's show. So Taj, welcome.
Hello, hello, hello. Good to be here. You guys might recognize me from my column called SmackDown Feud Tracker, where we break down all existing feuds on any given week for Friday Night SmackDown in advance of that week's show. But as Wade gave me a very charitable description, but I classify myself as an AEW Day One mark. I absolutely love this brand just as well as WWE, and I have been so excited to chat with Wade on one of these post shows. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Excellent. You got a fan in there. Kane Play Stuff says, I like Taj.
My guy. Let's go.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to say up front and quickly here. I say quickly. We'll see if I abide by that. We have a VIP sale going on. We announced it last week. We're still running it this week. A $10 coupon. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Gives you full details on VIP membership. Enter coupon code 2025 save 10. And that'll knock $10 off a 1 month, 3 month, or 1 year subscription. This is a full VIP subscription, not audio only. Unlocks 35 plus years of archives. We're approaching 40 of podcasts, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s, including my old KFAN radio show with big name guests, live caller format like this, and Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, back issues dating back to the late 1980s. For instance, we have I've written and covered every single SummerSlam. We also have our Royal Rumble Roundtable podcast that we've done after the Rumble every year since 2004 when we started podcasting. We have an RSS feed that you can subscribe to with VIP membership and access all 22 Rumble Roundtable post shows we've done. You can also listen to our radio shows that I hosted in the early 90s, reacting to early Royal Rumble events too. Those are just some examples of what comes with a full VIP membership. It's not just the current new content, the new podcasts that we do. It's not just the commercial-free, ad-free versions of these shows where when you get to commercial break, it just skips right past it and goes right to more content. It also includes a lot of VIP exclusive current shows and our 18 years ago VIP podcast vault episodes. Almost every day, there's a new show from our podcasting lineup back in right now, February of 2007. And we're marching through all our top podcasts at that time. So pwtorch.com/govip, pwtorch.com/govip. If you've thought about it, now's a good time to do it. We're in the heart of WrestleMania season, Revolution, lots going on. Unlock VIP membership, all the current coverage, and unlock our library. The coupon code again is 2025 save 10. If you're watching us on YouTube, we've got a QR code on the screen. You can point your phone at it. That will take you right to the sign up page. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts. When you get a confirmation email, click a link, boom, launches the app and authorizes the podcast feed for PWTorch VIP shows. It's that simple. It's a very frictionless sign up system we have set up and customized. So, but you don't have to use Apple Podcasts. You can use any podcast app on Android or your iPhone that accepts outside feeds. So, and that's a lot of them. All right. So with that said, I want to encourage everybody who is listening to us now to join in the chat room, which we'll be talking about in a moment. And you are invited and encouraged to participate in chatting with Taj and me about tonight's show, and we'll feature some of your comments. You can do a super chat, which will flag you and draw our attention. I can't keep up on everything going on in the chat room. If you really want to be mentioned on the show and have us respond, if it's pertinent to the show or just funny or something, we'll read it if you super chat it. So that option is there. If you want me to read something mean about Taj, I will not say it no matter how much you pay, up to a certain point, and then I'll probably read it. But I'll send Taj 70% if it's really mean. All right. So that's another way to participate is by email. Wade Keller podcast @gmail.com. We'll go to the mailbag later on and read some emails we've gotten on tonight's show. Wade Keller podcast @gmail.com. Real quick, if you listen to us after the fact and you don't watch us live on YouTube, but you watch the wrestling shows live, but you got to go to bed, put the kids to bed, watch the news. We should do more or less of that. I'm not sure these days. But you want to be part of the show. As you're watching Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown, send us an email and then download the podcast the next day or watch us on YouTube, and you can see if your email made the show and if we discussed the points you brought up or read your rants. And finally, another way to participate, as we'll be doing with Rude Dog in a minute, is as a video caller. And you have to be a Patreon supporter or VIP member to get the code to call and participate in the show. So that's another perk, by the way, of going VIP, is you can become a video caller, make yourself famous, share screen space with Taj and me as a VIP member. You can sign up right now and end up on the show if you're watching us live as we progress here in the show. And I'm supposed to say this more often, I'm told, please like this show. Also comment below if you're watching us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. All of that helps, and set the alarm to let you know, alert you on your phone or your laptop when we're about to go live. And there are, our post shows are Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. There's other shows that go live sometimes too, including after big wrestling events like PLEs and pay-per-views with Brandon LeClaire and Greg Parks for Wrestling Night in America. So like us, comment, subscribe, help our algorithm, help us grow. Okay. Taj, so I said the chat room was alive while we were talking about what was going on. I'll start with the aforementioned David Bryan comment. That closing segment made no sense. Quote, I care so much about this championship, so watch me destroy it. WTF. That just makes me want to root for Jon Moxley. Did you have a problem with that, Taj? The visual of, I care about this belt, and the segment ends with him smashing a spike board against the briefcase, perhaps destroying or doing damage to the belt. Or is that semantics? And David's got a point, but he was just trying to break the case open.
I mean, I'm in two minds. I get the intent, it's Cope saying, this is the legacy you're trying to start, this stupid briefcase. No, I'm going to destroy it with my legacy, which is Spike, which For anyone who doesn't remember, when he first brought out Spike on AEW, the pinnacle of Cope's run in AEW so far, the I Quit match with Christian Cage, where he won the TNT championship. However, when you have the immediate "I care about this championship," now let me take a nailed baseball bat to it. It's just a really awkward segue. So,
which a lot of Copeland material is awkward. I mean, like, he and Christian did that goofy show, but it's like sometimes he's like trying to be cool, but he's got this kind of offbeat sense of humor or ways of making points that can, off-putting's overstating it, but it's sort of uncool or like jarring and gets you a little bit out of the zone.
He definitely feels like a lot of people I knew in college, which I went to film school. It's the context for this. He feels like someone who has ideas for a highlight, but isn't concerned on the smoothest way to get there. So I knew he wanted to. It feels like he definitely said, I want to bring back Spike and I want to take it to the briefcase. But it didn't feel like they really went through the process of how do we get to that beat. So it just came across as Mox focusing more on the belts than his mission, and Cope saying, yeah, I care about the belt too. Now let me destroy it. So that to me is where the flaw in the plan is. Yeah.
And Zach Barber in the chat, the defender of AEW in the chat, says, David, how else does he break open the case? And David says he made the deal with Moxley, and Moxley lived up to his side of the deal. Why did he need to break it open? Could he not think of a way to break it open in a way that didn't destroy it? I mean, there is the argument, that David's making, which is, wait, he gave me a title shot. Just give him the damn briefcase back. I'll win this, and when it's mine, it won't be in a briefcase anymore. And maybe that's kind of what you're getting at, Tage, too, is like Copeland has ideas. It might help to have somebody steer him in a better direction and, take that line out. That's kind of cringy. I guess cringy is the word I was looking for earlier. Things Copeland says that are cringy sometimes. And in what makes it cringy is it's a 50-ish-year-old guy trying really hard to be cool, living in the past. But I've been more of a fan of Copeland Edge's career than not, but I think he's been cringy a lot with just sort of his natural personality tendencies on promos over the years.
Yeah, he's a goofy dad at the end of the day.
Yep.
And that works sometimes because, it comes across as just like a stern guy saying, all right, playtime's over. Now it's time to remind you that I dove off a 20-foot ladder. But every now and then it just comes across a little bit too geeky, and it takes you out of the immersion, which is the crucial thing. And when you've got Jay White, who's so much better at being an intense kind of feral character, giving that final beat to Cope, it makes me roll my eyes just a little bit.
Yep. We'll get to Rudog in a second. I'll read, and then we'll get to Brian Zillum, who has joined us with his on-site perspective too. Derek Hubbard just noted, my main roadblock to the Moxley title reign is I'm not interested in watching him wrestle. His brawling shock spot style has run its course. It lacks creative transitions and moments. It is stale. He is an aggressive brawler who is not dynamic or explosive. Couple that with the fact that he is not a great seller and it does not show enough yellow streak to put his opponent over. I thought he showed some yellow streak tonight, which I thought was good. It was refreshing. He was in the corner taking a beating and didn't get up right away and, power up and no sell. So I think part of the reason people have cheered him when he's tried to sort of be a shades of gray tweener heel, whatever weird zone he's been in for a lot of last couple of years. Ultimately it undercuts the babyface opponents he's against, and he's primarily wrestled babyfaces. And if you're a heel and you're undercutting babyfaces, you're not doing your job. If you're a point guard in the NBA, jacking up shots left and right, you're not getting your teammates involved. You better make all the shots, like all of them, or, so, and he's not. So your job is to get your babyface opponents over. You want to stay over too and be a threat, but you got to show the yellow streak, as Derek says. Style wise, his style's not for everyone. I've been an advocate for him dropping weapons and working more. I think he underestimates how good he is as a ring psychologist and selling and body language. When he isn't just bleeding and using weapons, that's obviously. I mean, he told me when I did the interview with him when he left OWB and went to AEW, he's like, I'd be working in CCW right now if I could for $100 payoffs rather than stay in WWE. It's not about the money. It's in his heart. But Tage, he is better than a garbage hardcore wrestler. And I think he sometimes overdoes it in that regard. And I understand Derek's point of view in that regard. But I think we've seen a good sample of him not relying on weapons and blood too. I'd like to see more of that. It feels not a great fit for the centerpiece world champion of AEW in this era.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, anyone who's just a garbage hardcore wrestler could not have survived in a G1, which Moxley did to great acclaim. I personally still do like Deathmatch Mox. I think he can pull that off better than really anyone else in an American TV promotion. But I do appreciate that they've toned down on the bleeding in just random TV matches. I think like throughout 2024, he barely bled if you go back and watch. And they're committing to like every kind of Moxley deathmatch being a bigger spectacle, like the Anything Goes brawl that we're about to get in Grand Slam, which coupled with the fact, Cope brought out the red flannel, which makes me think we're getting a few odes to Mick Foley this time around. I think we might be getting Deathmatch Cope in Brisbane. But, they're definitely making Deathmatch Mox feel like more of an event, which is what I think is needed for him.
Yeah. JC Scooby 1976 says Adam Copeland becomes a joke, or has become a joke in AEW. Azan White says Cope walks a weird line. Rodrigo Hernandez said what stood out to me in the last segment is how quiet the fans were. Azan says Cope reminds me of Brad Pitt personally. And GWF ESPN 1992 says, I cringed so hard I want to jump out of my skin when he grinned at the briefcase and said, I have some past experience with one of these, and then all but winked through the fourth wall as he retrieved Spike from the briefcase under the ring. So anyway, there's some comments. Let's bring Rude Dog into the conversation. People missing Rude Dog's contributions to the show. Rude Dog, welcome. Good to see you again. How things going?
Hey.
Hey, Wade. Hey, Tage. Great to talk to you.
Skinny Puppy was my favorite Evolve wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
Did he tag
team with Austin Theory?
With Fat Cat.
Oh, okay.
I'm making bad Copeland jokes now. I'm for audio listeners, we're referring to Rude Dog's t-shirts and his history of wrestling t-shirts with us. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I won't step on your point.
No, it's fine. I don't know if I had a point, but all right. So you're talking about Copeland, and what about the dynamic between Copeland and Jay White?
Yeah.
Like, is this doing anything for Jay White? Like, he kind of seems like his little buddy, and
yeah.
Like, what do you feel about their dynamic?
I'll throw it a quick Tage, but I will say in the backstage interview, it was interesting that Copeland like leaning back or like squatting against something. Well, Jay was standing up tall, so their kind of eye levels were equal because height-wise, there's a big difference. Copeland is deceptively tall, and Jay White is a lot of guys his height in AEW, but he's not a tall guy. I really like Jay White's the rhythm of his talking, and I mean I think physically that he emotes during promos in a way that is stylistically, I think, main event, really attractive. If you're a booker looking at this guy going, I can do something with this, face or heel, but I think face is underrated with him. I don't think anyone who's a big Jay White fan would give Tony Khan an A grade for how they booked him. Is hanging out with Copeland have some positives and negatives? I mean, Copeland, even if you're kind of rolling your eyes at him at times, he's a legacy star with big name value. He's teamed with a lot of people, rated RKO. There's so many, like, Jay White is in a long line of people who have benefited from him or had synergy with him or famous feuds with him. Even if Rude Dog's tone suggests maybe it's not doing a lot for Jay White, that's what I'm reading into Rude Dog's tone. Maybe there's some residual positives that come from it. What do you think so far?
I mean, personally, I think Cope and Jay White make a very good pair because the pacing of their promos specifically match very, very well. Jay White has a very distinctive cadence to his promos that are kind of engineered to get the crowd to kind of poke and needle the crowd in a very annoying way. But when you move that to a babyface run, he needs someone to really kind of ping pong off to establish that camaraderie, and no one's better at doing that as a babyface than Cope because he just has this genial energy to him that's really, really just fun and brings you in.
Yeah.
So I think that short term, if this goes on for much longer than Grand Slam, this opinion could change. I think short term, this is beneficial to get Jay White over as a babyface. Additionally, I became a Jay White fan during his New Japan run, like a lot of people did. And he's almost more entertaining when he's just kind of on the sidelines lurking, just ready to strike, because no one can pull off a heel turn out of nowhere like Jay White. So I think
that crossed my mind. Yeah.
I think the potential for a lot of Cope promos in the lead up to Revolution with Jay White just kind of skulking around in the background is going to be really interesting. I would not be surprised to see Jay White get a title shot after Cope at Revolution, potentially a Dynasty, because there's not an obvious challenger lined up there yet, because Double or Nothing, I'm willing to hazard a guess Death Riders will be involved in Anarchy in the Arena. So that leaves a 1 to 2 month gap where Mox needs something to do. There's not a huge amount of time to build up a new challenger from scratch. So right now, I'm cautiously optimistic. It doesn't feel like he's getting the biggest reactions, but I'm curious, Rude Dog, what you think? How much of that was swayed by Texans just kind of loving their home field boys, and Cope and Jay White just aren't that, so it just feels a little quieter after a Dustin Rhodes?
I wouldn't say it had anything to do with anything. I just feel like Jay White has been mishandled his whole career so far in AEW. He's had a couple glimmers of hope here and there, and I'm not sure if this is even one of them.
It might not be. I mean, AEW has.
Know.
Rude Doug, you're being thoughtful about this, but AEW has to earn your trust, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, you can sit here and go, well, I want to be, because you're trying to be fair, but you're also trying to be honest. And they haven't earned your trust that this is a positive, that there's a story arc here that's going to be, that is either exists, or if it does, it's going to be handled well. And your voice and your inflection is a result of years of watching AEW and being let down often enough that you see something that other people might go, oh, let's be optimistic, and maybe this can go somewhere. And you say, I've been there. And more often than not, it hasn't.
Right. No, that's
I didn't mean to talk for you, but I didn't mean to talk for you, but I was like, I could see you struggling. I'm like, I know you well enough, and I'm watching your body language. Tell me if I'm right. It sounds like I'm pretty close. So.
You are 100% right.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's end the show there. That's a great line to end on.
Great night, Wade is 100% right. You heard it here first.
That's all I care about. No, I don't. I'd like to progress towards being right through good conversation with smart people who are, bringing honest analysis, unbiased, honest, passionate analysis to these conversations. Okay, enough on that. Go ahead, Rudo.
All right. Different subject. So I think a few years ago, you were saying maybe Max Caster could have a good singles run in AEW.
Mm-hmm.
You even went to one of his rap concerts.
I did.
Which wasn't really a rap concert, but anyways. So what do you... If you would have ever thought this guy had a chance, how he's being presented right now, did you think there would be any way this would be his singles push?
I didn't know he idolized Grayson Waller as the epitome of or I don't even know. Maybe there's trying to think of a better example of aiming low. Yeah, I mean, I thought he had a cool edge to him, 4 or 5 years ago. I thought his raps on the way to the ring had an edge to them. Sometimes they're a little more, crude and shock jockey than they needed to be. But I think there was something there. And, now he's not a serious person. And when you're not a serious person, you don't get to main event. You get to visit if you're someone's buddy for a couple months or something, but you don't really get to earn top money and be a top draw. And ever since he was doing that weird thing that had no context in canon of Dynamite, of stalking MJF on social media, and then it got dropped, and he went from what was the term David Bryant used for someone who was once cool and isn't? I threw off Frank Pettiani last week on the show when I brought it up. He's a lot. I mean, whatever cool factor he had, he's voluntarily given it up to be a lower card comedy guy, absurdly perhaps hilariously claiming he is the best wrestler in the world and then getting squashed. And I don't know where this is going right now, but I know where it's not going, and that's him reaching the potential that I once thought he had. Taj, what's going on with Max? What did you think of him at the peak as a day one AEW follower? And what do you think of this new direction?
I mean, the Acclaimed were, for a long time, arguably the biggest examples of a homegrown success in AEW. Like, they really kind of came from nothing, and they earned the.
They were on Dark.
Respect.
They were getting
they were getting
everyone's attention on Dark, and they're like, "Hey, Tony, bring these guys up, put them on the main roster."
Yeah, which was so great to see. Putting aside, Max Caster's potential as a serious main event player, I think he handles this role of a kind of delusional loser better than anyone else really could, especially when coupled with Bowens' rise to, a much more legitimate babyface threat. I've loved the best wrestler alive shtick, and because no one can do it like him. The sheer ego that he's had is incredible. It definitely feels like, for me, and this is just my hypothesis, like it's gonna end with him somehow stealing a win against a very self-important opponent, which is going to drive said opponent down the bend and kickstart a feud of Caster just skulking away. I do see a lot of potential in it, and more than that, I think stylistically it's very different than a lot of what's happening in AEW right now, which is great for the programming as a whole.
So one thing, Todd Martin talks about this. He's like, AEW is trying to be a variety show, and it doesn't have an identity. So I want to have you to clarify. Do you think anything that's different than something else is good for the AEW brand? Because I mean, Todd pushes back on that really strongly. It actually sets him off. Tony Khan should have a vision and stop, decide what you are, and then curate or edit or stop some things that might be entertaining, but they're not good for the brand, especially when you're trying to compete with WWE, and especially with what the initial vision was for AEW. Although I'll argue the first pre-show had the librarian on it doing goofy stuff, although it sounded like Tony Khan wanted to move away from that, but now we're back to something like this. And I'm not saying Caster's the librarian type thing, but anyway, you clarify that, Taj, because when people different, it's like unpredictable is good and different is good. Not always.
I think, I don't think there's really anything to clarify beyond, it's clear that AEW is attempting to be more of the jack of all trades in terms of, style in wrestling. They had inspiration. They had guys from PWG. They had guys from New Japan. They had guys from WWE. Those are and guys from CMLL. Those are 4 very different styles of wrestling. I consider it a feature, not a bug, because it's distinguishes the programming enough from its competitors on national television. And, I don't think anyone's really going to be able to compete with WWE, their level of pageantry, their spectacle. They're firing on all cylinders right now. So if you can't do the exact same thing better, I'd rather them be different and take swings, even if they don't always work, than,
And my counter to that is
strict consistency. Yeah.
My counter to that is the bookers who are acclaimed and are historically significant and succeed in the ballpark in which they're playing have a vision and they stick to it. Paul Heyman in ECW, Bill Watts in Mid-South, Vince McMahon with the Saturday's Main Event, early WrestleMania years era, or the Attitude era. Or what we have, and I'd argue what we have now is a Paul Levesque vision for what Prosen can be, which I don't want to get into explaining, but I think it exists. The promotions that struggle and never gain traction are the ones who I think fit what you just described, which is, since we can't be great at anything, let's be mediocre at a bunch of things and not let our audience know from one segment to the next what tone they're going to get. So you're watching, if you're watching a TV series, in 1 second it's a serious drama with murder, and the next second it's a comedy act along the lines of Friends, and then the next segment it's a hidden camera show. It's like it doesn't have a vision. TNA made the argument at their lowest point, we want a little something for everybody. And nobody knew what they were. ROH knew exactly what it was. Now, they didn't grow, but that's, but they survived and they had a core group. And so the argument with AEW is being sort of mediocre and a little bit of something for everybody. It doesn't give people, I asked Dixie Carter once, why would somebody watch TNA over WWE if they're a fan? And I that sounded like a loaded question. I didn't phrase it that way. if somebody is a fan of TNA and you see them passionately a fan of TNA, and you ask them why, what do you want their answer to be? What do you expect their answer to be? Why did they like TNA more than WWE, which has big budget? And she goes, well, our wrestling's better, which, by the way, it wasn't at the time. It was good, but it wasn't better than WWE. And it wasn't a good answer. And it showed no vision, no sense of what you needed to be. So I would push back and say, for AEW to actually have a chance, Tony Khan needs to get out of 2019 and 2020 and watch the WWE product, study it, and figure out what specifically can we be great at that is different than WWE. And yes, discard a bunch of other things that might be entertaining and fun and wrestlers suggest, but compete with that vision. Companies that don't grow and are distant number twos try to be an alternative that's a little something for everybody, historically speaking. The ones that are if AEW has a chance to succeed, it has to know what it is, believe in it, and execute it excellently. And yes, do it in a way that's a contrast with WWE. But you have to be aware of what WWE's doing. And you can't compete with them when they're successful if you're not watching them and you're not studying them and you're not advancing beyond where I think Tony Khan lives, which is 2018.
That's very fair. I think for me, they just haven't quite jumped that shark yet where they've gone from, a variety show in wrestling to just tonal disparity in wrestling. For me, there's just enough consistency. And my barometer is I still believe Max Caster could stand next to Hologram. I believe he could stand next to Katsuyori Shibata. I believe he could stand next to John Moxley. And I buy that they all are in the same universe.
Mm-hmm.
Barely, but I still buy it. And the day I don't buy it, that's when I'll agree that, that vision needs to be tightened up. I think that, it has been tightened up quite a lot from the days when they were bringing in Luigi Primo to do spots. That's when it felt like they were really just trying to be like, oh, PWG on TV, goofy things for the sake of goofy things.
Although we got the Costco guys, so.
Well, yeah, but that's a celebrity tie-in. I think of that in a different. I bet
a lot of AEW fans don't.
Scale.
I think a lot of AEW fans were proud AEW fans are like, I can't wear an AEW t-shirt anymore if these dorks are on the show and he's selling out and if he's selling out the brand to get some social media hits when that shouldn't be the business he's in. I think it's terrible for the brand to associate with them, given what I think the only chance AEW has to grow is to go, see these guys? Where's 911 to choke slam them? They should have been on TV for 15 seconds, and their equivalent of Paul Heyman's 911 should have come out and choke slam them through the ring, and they should have never been seen again. And say we're not selling out for some Instagram, YouTube, wherever, TikTok, and we're just TikTok, selling out for some dorky TikTok father-son act. That's not what we're about. But instead, they keep featuring them. So, yeah,
it's yeah.
Oh, circle back to Caster because you made a point about him existing in the universe, and you said that I wouldn't say defended that, but you framed the act in a way that he knows, and someone in the chat did too. Like he knows what he's doing, but if you get squashed and run, I don't know how you recover from that. Like he got destroyed and then fled the scene. Like he's making cartoon coward faces. I don't see the endpoint of this being getting back to where he once was or anywhere where people take him seriously again. I don't know what that transformation could possibly be at this point. I think Max Caster has defined himself down to a preliminary comedy guy, and I don't think there's any coming back from it. And I prove me wrong. I would love to be proven wrong because I think there's talent and that was untapped. But this is not a path to that. I've never seen it.
I mean, this is where I do think I will push back on you a little bit, just because I think that anyone who has been like delegitimized in wrestling, there is always a way to come back from it. And it comes from, giving them a little bit of authenticity, a little bit of legitimacy, and then you can grow that week to week to week. A lot of people thought that certain jobbers in WWE, I think Tozawa, I'll use Tozawa as an example, the guy was being used for like 30-second squashes for years. And, there's no real way to plausibly buy him as a threat. And arguably, he's still not a threat. But then you put him with Alpha Academy, you give him something to cling on to. Now he's more than that. Now he's a lower to mid-card guy, but that's more than just, a joke spot. He's had kind of heartfelt moments where, he walked out on Chad Gable alongside, and all the rest. Mm-hmm. And in the same way that we've witnessed Max Caster kind of de-evolve into this kind of sniveling weasel that's afraid, people remember like throughout 2024, he went from, confident, He was doing the raps on the way to the ring. He had that arc where he started like stumbling on his raps every now and again because he kept getting flustered to the point where when Bowens left him, no clever comebacks, no nothing. He just said, well, screw you and screw you and screw you. It was the most juvenile, like blustery comeback of all time.
Yeah.
We've witnessed this guy's personality degrade. And similar to how Hangman's slowly coming back by finding some form of righteousness to grab onto, I think, the minute Caster gets some authenticity, something genuine to fight for and put his effort behind, there's a path forward. I think you are not giving him enough credit when you say that, like, all right, there's no way to kind of bring him back at this point.
So Zach noted, and I want to address what you said, this kind of part of it. He said he didn't run. He stood at ringside and pointed at his trademark. He did run before the match started. He like ran into the crowd, and Hangman had to literally drag him back to the ring, and then he beat him in a minute or two. So he ran from the heel. He lost decisively. If the argument is he's going to forge a bond with the fans by being entertaining, as someone bragging about being the best in the world, which is an absurd notion, but he's not so bad. It feels totally delusional. It just feels like he's obviously not the best in the world. He hasn't had a standout singles match that I can recall, where you would even say that with a straight face. So it's clearly parody. The question is, does he believe it, or is he saying it to be ridiculous for some other purpose? And I don't trust that has been thought through. I see so much on AEW, which is wouldn't it be fun if, and they do it and they don't know where they're going with it. If there is this arc that you're describing, Taj, I would love for that to be the case, and I would love for him to recover, and I'd love for him to forge a bond with the fans in a way where he goes on a journey where something happens, like you said with Hangman, obviously a very different path, but it jostles him out of this state of ineptness and delusion into something where the fans rally behind him. And I think that path exists, but like mentioned with Rude Dog earlier, I'd like to see that happen more often in AEW before I start gifting them that benefit of a doubt when I see a character like this simply going. I mean, he spent years just scissoring for merch money and sycophanting for Billy Gunn, a perennial sidekick on the less popular half of a tag team who failed as a singles wrestler, who was a mid-card act with a catchphrase who happened to be dropped into a hot era and had a really good gimmick. And in every match in AEW he's had has been the most selfish veteran you could possibly imagine, almost to a point of parody, and undercut the guys he was with. And yet they still seem to think this is good for our careers because, my God, he was in the Attitude Era. I thought that was selling themselves short, bordering on kind of pathetically underrating themselves for someone who wasn't deserving of it and didn't have that career. And Billy gonna punch me next time he sees me, but if he hears this. But I mean, I speak the truth. I mean, he had a great career and he capitalized on it. And made his money, but I mean, just because Tony Khan's scared to say no to Billy Gunn doesn't mean the Acclaimed should have spent the last few years subjecting themselves to being his subs. I mean, for this terrible mid-card stunting gimmick that, yes, made them some merch money, but destroyed everything that they had that people were into. Yes, people pop for things, but the Acclaimed should have been. I think they had a much higher ceiling than being lackeys for Billy Gunn and standing around letting him get all the glory in the matches and not having the agency to stand up to him. So yes, Zach Barber says, you hate Billy Gunn. My goodness. I am speaking the truth. When a veteran ruins the careers of two guys who I think had great promise, I'm going to speak out about it. It's not a personal hate. He could be a great guy. I don't know enough about him either way, but you tell me one thing I said that is wrong. I mean, push back, but don't say I hate him. That's just a broad statement. I'm not hating him. I'm stating what I think he did to hurt a young act. And I don't have time, but I could put together a 10-minute clip of him being grotesquely selfish in the ring, at the expense of everybody else he's in the ring with. As a guy who's around 60 years old with no future, he should be putting other people over. Go ahead. I'll just say one thing. I agree with 90% of what you said. I think that, them working with Billy Gunn for as long as they did stunted their growth.
I think they leaned a little bit too hard on, this old veteran being so comfortable with the innuendos and the whole scissor me daddy ass thing. I will say this though, the addition of Billy Gunn for me is what allowed the Acclaim to get as over as they did as baby faces. I think their dynamic with Billy Gunn felt naturally so much more wholesome than the two of them on their own, which naturally leaned a little bit more heelish to me. That to me is what kind of carried them through some more of their like lackluster babyface moments where they weren't in an active arc, especially the build to the original All In, that the trios match that centered around like Billy Gunn's possible retirement at the time. That to me was
who cares about Billy Gunn's retirement?
For those of you on the podcast, Wade just mimicked a yawn. Very sassy.
Yes. We're coming off Jeff Jarrett's retirement. Now you're going to harken back to something worse, which is like we care about Billy Gunn's retirement. I mean, talk about booking yourself to be a bigger deal than you ever were at a time when the focus should have been on other people. It was way too much TV time on a career that ended for all intents and purposes 2 decades ago.
100%. But where I was going with that is that was when I felt invested in the Acclaimed, because them genuinely getting insulted and saying like, how dare you disrespect this man who's done so much for us and is so accomplished. I felt more babyface fire from Caster and Bowens there than I had before. That's all I'm saying.
I lost respect for them when they thought that Billy Gunn did anything for them, because I think there's a whole array of other paths they could have taken that would have been much better than being lackeys for Billy Gunn for the last few years. Fair enough. I think more highly of them in their abilities to get over than you do if you think their ultimate path was Billy Gunn. A tall guy standing over them who was 20 years ago failed as a TNA singles wrestler, who did a Nostalgiac 10 years ago for WWE, and now is pinning people and not selling in matches week after week in a way that if a booker and promoter had any guts would have said, you're off TV. We got to book people who have a future or feature people on a short-term basis who are bigger stars than you, but you're not eating up TV time. Rude Dog, you're nodding along. Darrell Freeman says being with Billy Gunn limited them and halted them from growing and being able to be taken seriously. Rude Dog, I see you nodding. I want to know what you're nodding about.
Well, I just remember Billy Gunn no selling a match with Darby Allin, who's up and rising star, and and you always say he's unnecessarily big, which he is, and
needlessly tall. So, unnecessarily big works, but needlessly tall.
Okay.
To which Zach always gets mad, Rude Dog. He goes, he can't help how tall he is. Well, right, but he is. He's needlessly tall, and Randy Savage didn't want Nick Patrick refereeing his matches because Nick Patrick was 8 inches taller than him. I mean, that stuff counts. Anyway, go ahead. Oh yeah, Ryan Solario says Billy Gunn destroying Jay White a couple years ago makes me agree with Wade. Yeah, that was another instance of it. I'm just he shouldn't be. I mean, and by the way, I've talked to people in AEW who are so angry at Tony Khan for letting Billy Gunn just do whatever he wants all these years. I mean, people who care passionately about AEW are angry and resentful that Tony Khan didn't stand up to Billy Gunn. And I've just told Tony's scared of Billy.
That's the part where I agree with you. Billy Gunn's in-ring presentation has been way too omnipotent, way too powerful in kayfabe. He should not be having competitive matches with main event talent.
No.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments right now. As a passionate Jay White fan, again, I understood the intent of, all right, yeah, Jay White gets beaten up and for 15 minutes and then he finds one gap. That's the kind of heel he is, but that should not be against Billy Gunn. 100%. That was Hogan and WCW levels of I am going to book myself to be.
Wait. It was a Hogan Kidman feud. I'm gonna make Kidman look like a tight kid, and then he'll get a fluke win, and I'm gonna take all the credit in the world for putting somebody over because people accuse me of not. And he did it against somebody in a way that led to no boost to Kidman and was a totally transparently a selfish, false pretense putting someone over.
100%. That is where I completely agree with you, Wade. Billy Gunn should not be booked the same way as Powerhouse Hobbs. Not at this stage of his career.
Now, Fanblast says Billy Gunn's made some mistakes, but I'm sorry, he was a key to the Acclaim getting over. This is the thing. There are many paths that history can take, and the better path for the Acclaimed was the Acclaimed did not need Billy Gunn to get over. Stop. That is a false premise that we're talking about here. They did not need Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn was linked with them. They spent years doing scissors stuff with him that Billy Gunn was glomming. It was like Hogan glomming onto Hall and Nash and then taking credit for making the NWO so big. Hall and Nash were big before he glommed onto them. He helped because Billy Gunn's no Hulk Hogan. But Billy glommed on to a young, hot act and overshadowed them, bogarted them, became this shadow looming over them, and then claimed he was getting them over. And I'm sorry, there are different paths this world could have taken that would have led to the Acclaim being in a much better spot in February 2025 than the nonsense they spent years doing with Billy Gunn, shouting catchphrases over Sesame while Billy Gunn dominates. Did the Carney stuff to keep getting TV time. It's Billy Gunn feuding with Dixie Carter, Bully Ray feuding with Dixie Carter. It was like veterans use Carney ways to stay on TV, and that's what Billy Gunn did. He didn't. I can't look into Billy Gunn's heart and say if his desire was to get the Acclaimed over. But I think his primary goal is to get TV time.
Yeah, he worked and he enhanced their act. It was not the best route they could have taken, and Billy Gunn should not have been booked the way he was in ring. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Essentially a little less harsh than yours, Wade, but the same.
Oh, it's very much less harsh. But you're it's a fair. I have my opinion of yours. I think he enhanced their act while also completely sabotaging and cutting off their momentum from becoming what they could have been. They became something because of him, and they could have been much more without him. We don't know. So Rude Dog, you're back. You dropped off, and now you're dropping off again. Let's see. We're going to Brian Zillum in a minute here. I know Brian's sitting there waiting for us. Sorry, Brian, if it's getting late. I'm giving Rude Dog a few seconds for his internet to fix.
Here's what I'm curious about. You want to talk about certain acts glomming onto hot young properties. The Learning Tree made an appearance tonight.
Well, let's. It looks like Rude Dog's back. I don't want to leave Brian hanging any longer. But Rude Dog is back. So let's. Before we introduce a whole other segment. Oh, now we got two Rude Dogs. We can't have that. There we are.
There we go.
Okay. We got you back. Rude Dog, what else do you want to bring up? And then we are going to get to our on-site correspondent.
All right. Brian. I'll be real quick. Sorry. Yeah. I live in mid-Michigan now. I'm in
Michigan.
Middle of a big snowstorm. So internet connection sucks usually, always, and now even worse today. But so just one final question. You were talking about the people that call the match. Do you know the status on JR? Is he still going to be with the company? Because I think the last I heard, his contract was kind of coming up around this point in time. Just curious if you know anything about that. And that's it.
Okay, thanks. I haven't heard or read anything. Doesn't mean there hasn't been something out there. I don't know. I'm kind of processing, like, would WWE like to bring him back? JR's back. I mean, Paul Levesque's history is bring back people who have had, fallings out or gone elsewhere or whatever. So I could see that. But it would take pretty intimate knowledge of the machinations of where, how grumpy he's been to the point of turning people off. I haven't listened to his podcast where I've gotten a sense of things. But yeah, Tej, have you seen anything or heard anything or have thoughts on that? Would you like to see him hang out in AEW and make his, 1 or 2 matches per PLE and kind of elevate them with his presence and voice and inflections and just the gravitas of who he is? Or do you think it'd be kind of fun to see him do something in WWE as sort of a way to wind up his career?
I mean, personally, I think that bringing him in for one big match adds a level of gravitas to an AEW match that they have a hard time getting to otherwise because they don't have the pageantry of a WWE announcer. It's like an easy cheat to make something feel big and grand as bringing JR. So for that reason alone, I would love to see him keep doing it. I think he's had a lot of iconic moments in AEW, and I think Tony Khan allows, old wrestling legends the on-air reverence that, WWE just doesn't sometimes have the room for with these lengthy retirement runs. And I think there were rumors that very originally he was going to give JR his own entrance at All In 2023 before it was cut short. I don't think that WWE would have done that on air. I could be wrong. That's just my hypothesis. Jesse Ventura was brought back, but that was done a lot more low key. So
yeah,
I think it's better for JR to be in AEW personally, but it would always be fun to see him come back to WWE, get in the Hall of Fame, and do a speech here or there.
Yeah. JR inducted me in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. The Jim Elby Award. He introduced me before I stepped up to the podium back in 2015. I got the plaque on the wall.
Congratulations again.
It was a cool honor. It was like, there's Jim Ross. I mean, because he and I go so far. I don't know if I have more podcast. I have more podcast hours with Steve Austin than Jim Ross, but I think Jim Ross might be number 2 over the years in terms of Torch talks and podcasts, doing his show, him doing mine, me doing his. And he and I are so in sync on wrestling philosophy. You think I'm coming hard at you on Billy Gunn? He's like more grumpy at times about his what's going on today and what he believes in. And I by comparison, perhaps in most cases, but not always, more diplomatic. Although there are times Jim Ross was being very diplomatic but we basically were in sync. It's just a matter of, how strongly were we pushing back on the stuff that we didn't like. But I love my JR podcast with Jim Ross. We're so in sync on what we liked about the past, what we think is timeless and could be parachuted into today's era, and work and enhance things. And so, yeah, as someone said in the chat, let me find it. Ryan Solorio says, I think JR stated on his podcast that he re-signed. Although you wrote resigned, by the way, it's a terrible accident in English language that two opposite things are spelled the same without a dash. I think you meant re-signed. And if that's the case, that's the news I'm looking for. If anyone else can back that up, that's great. And Sadler version 3 said Jim Ross would probably be best in NXT helping young talent. Him to Booker T would be an awful team on commentary though. And Portly Gent says JR commenting with Pat McAfee sounds like a hilarious nightmare.
That sounds like it would be so grating on the ears.
Oh my god!
No disrespect to Pat McAfee. I think he works well with Michael Cole, but only with Michael Cole.
Yeah, I almost want to pause for like 30 seconds just to imagine Jim Ross just like reacting to McAfee's nonsense and deciding I could see Jim Ross deciding, is this how I want to get fired? Is like telling McAfee to sit the F down and be a professional, like, or something like that. I could just imagine.
He's looking at McAfee, he's like, not today. Not today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Today.
All right, let's get to our on-site correspondent, PWTorch's own Brian Zillum joining us. He attended last night in Austin in person, and now he joins us to talk about that experience. Brian, welcome.
I'm really sad I missed all the Max Caster talk and the Acclaim talk. I feel like
here you are.
Where has this been? Oh, well, I mean, I will say if I could actually add one point, because
it depends on whose side you're on. No, I'm kidding.
Well, actually, it's more neither. It's more like history onyx, in my opinion, because if you actually go back to when the Acclaim actually won the tag team titles, do you recall there was like probably thoughts and opinions that FTR didn't want to, like, there was that weird transition between Acclaim to Guns to FTR, which I still stand by. It was a horrible decision. Acclaim should have just lost that match to FTR that night, which they were in Austin, because I was in Austin last night for the show. That match was incredible. I think it went like 25 minutes. Max Caster, like, and Bowens were obviously tremendous. Cash Wheeler, who's a maniac, did some crazy just dives, and I feel like you can kind of like circle back and kind of like pull the thread. It's like, I wonder if it would have been better for the Acclaim just to lose the tag team titles straight up and then turn heel on Billy Gunn and then go a completely separate direction rather than kind of stay stagnant. I mean, they obviously made AEW a lot of money, and everybody has like their spot on the card, and that's completely fine. But Wade, I'm with you to agree. They probably should have moved on with Billy Gunn. I think they are both very still talented people. I think there's still a pathway for Anthony Bowens to be a single star in AEW, because I feel like he adds so much. He provides with being an openly gay wrestler first and foremost. He's a good-looking guy. He can actually go in the ring. He's a wonderful PR asset for AEW as well. He does things for Major League Baseball. I think he's like a jack of all trades, and I think AEW is really lucky to have him.
Yeah, I hope they find yeah, I'm trying to think of the right word, useful, pertinent, fitting role for him that isn't a token spokesperson either. You don't want to just think, well, they're keeping him around for that reason, because he is the 5-tool. Is it the 5-tool player? Is that the phrase he used? It's been so long since he's been referred to that.
That sounds right. That sounds
yeah.
right.
Yes, I believe so.
So I hope he comes back and gets, figures out how to be a serious person and overcome the dark shadow cast by the Billy Gunn scissoring nonsense that he got way too into, in a way that I thought was unbecoming after, so I think there's still something there. He's better off being off TV than what Max Caster is doing. If your goal is to be, an upper mid-carder, Daniel Garcia, TNT title, whatever level guy, that probably is his ceiling at this point. He's not a young guy anymore in wrestling terms. It feels like he is, but he's I think he's mid 30s. So I think he wasted 34 years old. So he just turned 34. So that's not well, whatever. It's not that far from 35. But I think he wasted a few years. He could have been establishing himself as more of a Bret Hart type guy, breaking out of a tag team and having really good singles matches, and putting some work together on a Japan tour or whatever, and building his cred and becoming a next generation guy that people see as fitting the AEW motif of we're the best wrestle. And instead, he's been doing what I've been ranting about. Go ahead, Brian. So let's talk. Well, anything more on the Acclaimed?
No. I will say, I think people might not remember, there was that Collision Christmas show where I believe he kind of officially broke up with Caster, and I guess Penny's deciding to make her podcast debut. Hi, Penny. And it was actually really, really good. It wasn't like long. And I don't know this for fact, Wade. You may know more than I. I'm hopeful that they're just kind of putting him on the side until they really have a plan. Because like you said, there's nothing worse than, like, you obviously want to be on television, but like, it's almost worse to be on television existing and not connecting and doing anything. So if he's like, they're really trying to plot out what his next step is, obviously still some threads. But I don't know. That might be complicated now with the Hurt Business kind of potentially turning. But there's avenues potentially for Bowens to do stuff. I want to trust the process with Bowens and say they are trying to plan something. I don't know this for factual information. Don't aggregate that. But I just feel like they are.
That'll stop them if they think it'll get clicks. They'll aggregate anything out of context if it'll get clicks and make their editor happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Anthony Bowens, I hope it is a retooling of the tool player, and he comes back and finds a way to shed whatever damage has been done, but capitalize on whatever name value he has. I just hope I never hear him say "Scissor Me Daddy" again, because I think it lived its life, and it's time to move forward in a different direction. Cool. So Brian, last night you been to AEW shows. What was the vibe in that building? How did it feel? A dying promotion, or a promotion with a passionate core fan base in a cool town that embraced what they're doing now? Where did it fall?
I feel like I kind of speed run the show, like as you guys were kind of opening up the first hour. How accurate do you think my in-person report was? Do you think it was like kind of on the nose? Obviously, you guys might have some like different opinions on things. I try to be like in the moment as I could on things.
Yeah, it's tough writing. I'll put it this way: it's tough writing a report on something that everybody's going to see later that day or the next day,
right?
And have like you're there live. Your memory is, oh, did this happen in this order? Are my notes there?
Right.
No, I would have to go back and I did this magical thing that I've learned to do over the old days of SmackDown tapings in the 2000s, which is proofread for grammar and formatting, but not pay close attention to all the details of what happened, because I wanted to watch the show.
For sure.
Without thinking a lot about the content. So I read it like it was a foreign language. Like I knew the rhythm of how to add a comma and, match a format. I wasn't paying super attention. I was like, don't remember this. I just want to watch the show. And so I'd have to reread your report. I was like, at one point I thought your match time on the women's match that went like 9 minutes was wrong. And I was like, oh, how could he be off by like 5 minutes? And then I went back and I'm like, oh, it was me who was off by 5 minutes. You were right. I was wrong. So that's the only thing I remember is I thought you were right and I was wrong on my timing of my math of how long a match went.
Oh, can I get that on a plaque? Because that'll probably never happen again.
No, I was literally about to say, just to cling on to that moment, Brian.
Yeah, aggregators clip that. I want that shared everywhere.
There you
go. There we go.
But yes, to answer your question, Wade, as far as the vibe, tremendous. I mean, the HEB Center is always like a great showing. I'm really glad that they decided to move away from the bigger venue in Austin that SmackDown ran, in which did it fine, but like I don't know, the wrestling shows haven't hit in that location yet. The HEB Center is always an intimate location. It was close to 3,000 people, and it was interesting because I thought the crowd even sounded better on television. I was really happy. I mean, obviously, at this point, it should be almost Texas elite wrestling at this point because any Texas crowd is just a cheat code.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it's like if they're just in the mood. I mean, it's not like it's Tuesday night was a school night, but I mean, the show started, AEW started taping around 7:30. Everybody was out by 9:30. So like, that's great. Like, so in and out, everybody was tremendous. I was with, friend of the show, Cameron Hawkins. So we made our, drive there.
Sweet.
It was very convenient. Shout out to Cam. But yeah, no, the crowd was great. Everybody we sat with was really into everything. I really enjoyed Wade. There were so many parents with small children just having a great time. I really, really enjoyed that. I know we're jumping ahead, but one of the cutest things I think I've ever seen on a wrestling show, there was a small child sitting on his mom's lap. Couldn't have been more than maybe 4 or 5. And he, in a cute child voice, he was chanting, "We hurt people." And I was like, man, that's about the cutest damn thing I think I've ever heard in a wrestling show. That's fantastic. Could you?
So if AEW is going to embrace the parents bringing their small, I teach their own, and every kid's different. I don't think kids should be going to wrestling shows until they're like 9 or 10. Personally, I think even,
that's fair.
Yeah, I think even, I mean, you got to know your kid. I mean, different kids are different, are going to handle things differently. But when I see 4 or 5-year-olds at shows, even WWE, which, but I mean, it's a lot of violence. It's confusing. Right. It's loud noises. It's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but again, I know there's people listening who are like, I brought my kid to WWE and when he or she were 6 and it was their favorite memory. It's like everybody's different and stuff. Right. But I just sort of as a general rule, I'd be like, default 9-10 years old, or it's have a good reason to stray from that. And so so I don't think AEW should go after the 5-year-olds with their content. I think that would undercut their competitive advantage that they might have over WWE with the swearing and the violence and the blood.
Sure.
But if they are going to go after that audience and they think, hey, maybe that's how we can grow, they're going to have to augment some things. And John Moxley might be actually even more angry than he has been.
Probably. And I think it was Taj brought it up earlier, Wade, and I'm trying to think of what exactly you
Todd
said,
Martin
Taj,
on the VIP exclusive show The Fix, that some people call the greatest wrestling podcast of all time. And if you're not a VIP member, $10 coupon 2025. What is, I don't even, now I forgot the coupon code. How can I do that? I'll put it on the here it is. 2025 sale 10. And you can listen to The Fix for a $10 discount. Go ahead.
Wait, you should post that in the chat. You should post that in the chat so that always there.
That's what people tell me, but I don't.
Yeah.
Why would I want to learn a new thing when I can put this cool red banner on the screen and say it?
I respect that. But what Tosh brought up a good point earlier, Wade, about AEW kind of toning down the language and the blood a little bit. So I don't know if we kind of want to justify that as augmenting, but I don't think, I mean, there was the occasional, I think Dustin Rhodes said bitch, but in terms of language, everybody was pretty it was for an AEW show, it was pretty clean. There was no blood from what I recall. Yep. So if you were in theory going to bring a small child to a show, that probably would have been a great show, because there wasn't anything super crazy as far as spots or oh my God, I don't want my child to jump off a table kind of thing. So this was actually kind of for them.
What if you show up when they decide to have the bloodbath that week? Twice a year they have a bloodbath.
No,
I mean,
I agree. It's very, very tricky.
And how did Dustin Rhodes not just gush all. I mean,
that was on my bingo card. Like that was like an easy. Like I was really surprised. You know, it looked like he just did his hair. It was blood. I'm really interested to see what out went commercial free because we saw it, and then I saw the advertisement later that night that they were going commercial free. So very interesting strategy. We'll see if it works. You know, because I feel like anytime they've done kind of like special and those matches MJF has gone long, they've historically I think they've done pretty well. Wade, am I wrong there? Because I think back of like the match he had with Ospreay that opened that went an hour, and I believe that was like one of their highest quarter hours in a while.
Yeah, I don't know how much applies now after everything that they've been through.
Right, with streaming for sure.
I mean, that's where I'm kind of like I'm trying to go. How much of the journey that he's been on, in particular in AEW in general, do we want to point to that stuff? It's just have a vision and execute it. And part of it too is I know Tony Khan's like obsessed with like, oh, when we do a double box break and we have Mariah May on, we lose 12% fewer viewers than if we did Sammy Guevara Signs. I'm like, this is not the minutia that you need to be worried about. That's a baseball team losing 12-3 and going, well, home plate had some dust on it. It's like, no, you got to build the minor league system up. You got to have a better general manager. I mean, like there's big picture stuff and minute by minute stuff. I report on it when I think it's relevant. I think you can learn something from it, but it's not a top 10 list of things that are going to help turn around AEW's fortunes
for sure.
But I don't mean to completely discount it. I think there are indicators in there that can encourage you, but sometimes it's the result of doing something that can't be replicated. But that's a whole other. Brian, let me ask you this, because we're talking about Dustin Rhodes. How did his Legends babyface response compare to Hangman Page, who seemed mega over? I think that's one of the stories of the show. Or Adam Copeland coming out at the end. Like, compare the babyface reactions. We're putting in context. Dustin had I think a very competent build with an excellent payoff tonight on the show. With a great heel MJF who is in the spot, in the lane. And we're deep into the show, but I want to compliment what MJF did tonight and say more of that. So we had a lot of things going for him tonight, but talk about the crowd reactions with the baby faces.
I mean, in terms of just reactions, and I assume, Dustin always is going to get the biggest reactions in Austin. It just, it's automatic cheat code, but
yeah,
I was just, Wade, I'll throw my hands up. I was blown away by those reactions from Hangman Page. Like, just absolutely blown away. I was just like, good God. Like, he got like a huge reaction for the caster stuff, which is kind of very clapping. I'm glad they kind of did that. That's very cool. To this. But even I felt like he came out that first time and I was like, okay, he got a superstar reaction. That end of the brawl, that was like mega star reaction, which is kind of just, I know you guys have talked about, I've got my theories on Dictator John here, and I'll share here shortly. Seeing that reaction from that crowd, it just makes me rethink. I don't know what the plan is until All In, but Hangman needs to be involved in this picture one way or another, because it's interesting. Because when I talk to AEW hardcores, Wade, I always talk to them and relate to them. Hangman Page is the AEW version of Kevin Owens. He's always authentic. He's never wacky. He's always like that person you can relate to. Even though his actions may seem heelish, he can always justify his actions. And he was never a guy when the AEW was first pushing him. I didn't get it. I was like, okay, I guess like we're going to push this guy over Kenny Omega. That doesn't make sense. But then as he grew and he showed like the struggles he was going through as far as like his alcoholism, like mental health, like friendship, it's all relative stuff that I feel like in one part of our lives, like we can all relate to him. And now he's like, say what you want with like the Swerve stuff. That was probably one of like the best, like most successful feuds AEW's had in history. Now that he's finished that, he's on to like something very interesting. Because I don't think, other than that, maybe rare glimpse last year with Page and MJF before MJF lost the title, they haven't interacted at all the entire fight, like history of the company. So you have something fresh. That's fantastic. And I feel like this is kind of restoring MJF in a way too, because you can really, really tell. I mean, Wade, you've seen enough, and Taj, I know this is our first interaction, but I can really tell when someone's like they are really into something, and I can just kind of just look in the minor details of the television. You could tell throughout that brawl was amazing. Like and brawls, I think, are one of the hardest things to book on television, because you've seen one pull prop brawl, you've seen them all, right? Like, there's not much to it, but like just the fact that they were able to here we're gonna fight on the outside and try to push each other off the cliff. No, we're here, break it up again. And MJF is gonna grab the mic, and Hangman's gonna come back out again and still get that amazing like reaction. I was just blown away. And if people don't think Hangman Page is the main character of this television show, I mean, I don't know what else to say at this point. This is the guy that I like. Go ahead, Wade. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, no, you've been raving about him in your reports. There's times where I've disagreed, because I think a lot of people could get the praise that you give Hangman for yelling and frothing. I always thought Samoa Joe was better when he talked soft than when he yelled, and I think Hangman goes into the wide-eyed rage mode more often than I think is the high art of a pro wrestling promo. I think, he's way better than Dolph Ziggler, who just yelled all the time for no reason. But,
right.
I'm going to turn it. Why has no one thought to yell the whole time? I'm a genius. So I think Hangman sometimes is sort of melodramatic over the top, and people praise him for that. I'm like, to me, that doesn't work for me as much. But my point, my larger point is, I think sometimes he gets praised for the stuff he does on the fringe that but I want to turn this into a compliment, which is he's one of the people who, when he's yelling, and the same with MJF, but not Dolph Ziggler. Although actually Dolph even Dolph's an example of this. If you stop yelling, there's something underneath that's more compelling. It's like the writer who doesn't have to swear to make his point, and he makes it much more effectively than someone who's just dropping F-bombs and MFs all the time in their writing, or whatever they're doing. You just get numb to it. It's sort of hack.
Right.
It's a hack way to express yourself. Not all the time. There's times I'll swear, and it's like, but pick your spots. And that's why I have the bitchometer, because it's like, you get numb to it when everyone's saying it. It's so unimaginative. So I'm just going to try to mock it out of existence. Except, with rare occasion when it works. So
for sure.
And Dustin didn't get the message. Or didn't get the memo. To me, it's just eye rolling, because everyone's doing it so much the last 6 months. So let me wind back. Hangman is great because he doesn't need to yell to be great. And so I wish he just dialed it down. And also, fan of Hangman's promos, but if I were producing him, or want someone who is producing him to say, let's not talk about dismembering or maiming or killing. Scott Hall was great in the Torch Rock with me 18 years ago, when he was just like, you're not gonna kill him. Come on. Why would you? Why? Like he said, I just should put the clip here and play it every time I bring this up. I should dig it up, because I recreate it poorly. But he was like, when you say you're gonna kill someone, everyone drops out of the promo. It's no longer believable. It's a figure of speech. Well, come up with something more clever than that. Every hack promo guy says, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to cut your head off, or you're going to bleed to death. And it's like, oh, I was into it, but now I know you've just made a promise you're absolutely not going to keep, because that literally will not happen. So stop doing it. And so when people compliment Hangman, my first reaction is, yes, but it needs some curating. Stop yelling and stop saying you're going to kill people. Dial it back, because there is a nuance to his presentation, acting, body language, facial expressions. Brian, you're itching to get in, but Tej has been sitting there for a while. I want to get Tej's thoughts on this.
I'm interested. Go ahead, Tej.
Yeah.
No, I think, just going off of that, Brian, I think the reason why this feud is grabbing me so much more than anything else is it plays to both Hangman and MJF's strengths in a way that their recent feuds haven't. I think Hangman is head and shoulders the best long-term storyteller in AEW. Yes. Ever since his feud with Swerve, I've been able to track every single step of his emotional journey, and the way he segued that into, his feuds with Jay White and Jeff Jarrett as just collateral damage to get back to Swerve that then came back to roost was a level of just nuance that I don't think really any other performer has been able to work into their long-term programs. And, maybe they haven't had the space to in the way that Hangman has, but that's a different discussion. So kind of threading his crosshairs with MJF so naturally was the best possible way for Hangman to get involved, because it's like, this guy Max, he's not on my radar, but he keeps cropping up. Now he's pissing me off. I gave him the space to run wild with his heel promo. Now that pissed me off, and now he's my sworn enemy. It's a dynamic that Hangman positively thrives in, heel or face, and it's what MJF thrives in as well. MJF, for me as a heel, is at his best when he has a legitimate gripe against the babyface. It doesn't have to be like real. It doesn't have to be something we agree with. But when MJF is the instigator, he delves into the shock jock, low tier crap that a lot of people think is his worst work. That's why I wasn't grabbed by.
You even referenced that tonight.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't super grabbed into his feud with Daniel Garcia or Roderick Strong since he returned, because he had no reason to really single them out. Well, Garcia a little bit, but then after All In, it kind of petered out. But on the flip side, that's why I was so invested in his match, in his brief feud with Will Ospreay. Because what did Will Ospreay do? He wronged him. He made an offer to MJF, made an offer to Garcia. Ospreay one-upped him. That's something. And then MJF said, well, now I'm going to take this to the extreme, and I'm going to steal Ospreay's championship and mock him on the world stage. Taking these little transgressions to the utmost pettiness is where MJF thrives as a heel. Hanger's giving him the opportunity to do that. I also may be biased because it's looking more likely that the blow-off to this feud will be at Revolution in my backyard, and I might see it live.
There you go.
I'll say this, I'll throw to you, Brian. MJF and Hangman could have been a disaster because it's two people who are so talented when they don't escalate out of control. Like sometimes I was expecting, I shouldn't say expecting, I was fearing and anticipating the possibility that MJF and Hangman would be like two dogs at a dog park. I go to a dog park every other day with my dog. He needs it. 8 below zero. He loves it. He hates anything above 68 degrees, but he loves 8 below zero. So it's this winter, it's bundle up and you let him run around. And if another dog has a stick at the dog park, it's like, it's like, that's my stick and I'm going to fight you to the death for it. Or look like I am. It's still play, but it's like, oh, that's my stick. And then it starts out fun, and then it go and I'm the dog theme. Brian's dog is in his lap, look at his face right now. My dog's napping over there, but in an hour he'll be like, stop doing the podcast and feed me. I just woke him up. He's staring at me now. But
I don't have a dog.
Oh, they're great. But you gotta have time for them.
Right.
Okay. So But what I was worried about with MJF and Hangman, to make my point here, is that it would escalate like two dogs at a dog park who just start barking and growling and yelling over each other. And it just turns into just this cartoonish dust-up scuffle. And it's just two dogs just freaking out. And so, it's just rah, 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 growl, growl. And I don't want that. MJF tonight, he was going to yell, and I'm super critical of overmodulating on the microphone. And when MJF does it, or anyone does it, I'm going back to Samojo and TNA. I didn't like when he did that, and I love Samojo's promos, and he's one of I super respect for his talent on the mic. Though when you're yelling and you're overmodulating, it's like, come on, dial it down and do what do what Jake Roberts was really, really good at, which is get people's attention by being intense but talking quieter. People don't listen to yelling people. People go, why is that person yelling? That's all they're thinking. When you start talking quiet, people go, what's he saying? And they lean in. So MJF did that tonight. When he's facing Hangman, it was the place he'd normally start yelling, which would have been totally inappropriate in that circumstance. And then suddenly he's intense, but he was talking softer. And I was like, yes, now these two can bring out the best, not the worst in each other. And I thought it was a really good segment because I think they both were in that lane where their immense talents belong and shouldn't stray from, because they don't need to stray from it to have standout segments on the show. Brian.
Yeah. And like you said, Wade, it's always about the follow-up. We'll see what this face-to-face looks like next week. I hope it's something down the middle where it can accentuate both men. I feel like now that we have kind of like an official defined role for Hangman, I feel like his cadence will kind of like level out a little bit, because if you go back to his feud with Kenny as he was kind of making his like heroic journey to the title, I think back again, not to put over Austin, if you remember that famous promo he had with Kenny where he didn't cuss at Kenny, he yelled at him and he accepted his challenge. It was like one of the better promos I think AEW had done that year, and it wasn't like he got angry, but he basically waited till the end when he got angry. He said, "You are on," and accepted the challenge. And he kind of like was self-deprecating himself and saying, Kenny, you're right. Like, I might not be on your level right now, but I can beat you at some point. He's very just self-owning, giving himself grace. And like you said, we want to be able to have a conversation with you. We can have conversations, but when people are yelling, can't really have conversations with you. Be people.
Yeah, it feels hacked when wrestlers yell. There's a 3 times a year a wrestler should yell on TV, and you should get prior approval. Otherwise, you can be intense, you can raise your voice, but like the yelling, the overmodulating, it's just it's like, again, I was just I make fun of Del Sig a little bit. Like, why has no one thought of yelling constantly in your promo? It's like it's all caps. It's all caps. It's hack. It's lame. Stop it. The reason no one else is doing it is because it's unpleasant and it doesn't get your point across, and all people they're not listening to you anymore. They're just going, why is this guy yelling? So Tej, ask Brian something about tonight's show from an in-person perspective, if you got anything for him.
So the one segment that we haven't touched on this podcast, I'm very curious to see what the reaction was like, and that was Chris Jericho and Bandido's standoff, because it's a level of goofiness and unreality that was far beyond anything that AEW does on a week-to-week basis and anything on this show. What was the reaction like in the room when they realized, okay, this is what we're doing here?
I mean, relatively speaking, it was fine. The crowd was still cheering. They weren't like disrespectful or anything. Wade's like laughing because he knows like stuff like this really just grinds my gears. Because I basically wrote in my in-person report, I was like, okay, why did we have to waste 2 segments to get this interaction with Hobbs and McBill? Very contrived, like just didn't make any sense. And the thing I was kind of annoyed at, Jericho kind of took away from a really cool spot on Collision with Brian Keith and Bandido, because that was the talk of the town for the weekend. Nobody was really talking about SmackDown. Everybody was talking about this spot and how amazing Brian Keith, the bounty hunter, looked in his home Houston, Texas. I was actively annoyed where I don't know if Jericho was trying to like kind of glom on to Brian Keith's big moment and Bandido's like excellent return. I was actively annoyed. I did not really care for that, honestly, Taj. But like, as far as like a crowd perception, like the crowd was great. Like they were still fine because they were like, "Oh, Chris Jericho, he's a star." Big reaction for Bandido. Again, glad he's getting those reactions coming back, and good reaction. And everybody was obviously, I think, also I think they were also intelligent enough and wise enough to kind of understand. Okay, we're gonna get the chant meat here in a minute. Let's eat our vegetables and we can have fun. So that was like my overall evaluation segment that I didn't care for.
My issue is there is no such thing as a wanted poster bounty thing, and they're treating it even in the tone of it sort of being comedic. It's like Big Bill's showing up. I got a wanted poster. I'm going to collect on it, and again, nobody connects with that because that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
So the whole premise of this is it's cute. It's this cutesy takeoff on a Western combined with pro wrestling, and it'll be entertaining. But no one connects with that. People connect with is they want Jey Uso to take the World Heavyweight Championship from Gunther, because Gunther is full of himself and privileged and feels like he was that he talks about how he was destined for this and he was given the best training, the best schools, was pampered, he was a chosen one, and Jay's a tag wrestler who people have overlooked, and this title means something, even though there's 2 world titles in WWE. Gunther's brought prestige to it, he's treated as important, and people want Jey Uso to be a main eventer who wins a world title at WrestleMania. That's all within the canon of WWE's world that they create. The rules of engagement, the 4 wall, it fits. A bounty from the 1800s doesn't fit. It's not a thing. It doesn't. If you like, I think wrestlers lose sight of it when they're trying to be entertaining, and I think Jericho, quote, should know better. I think he's just trying to find material to fill TV time at this point in his career. But it should work within the world that AEW creates, and it doesn't. WWE's. So before Zach starts listing 3 things WWE did wrong that I'm not talking about in the chat, WWE's done this a lot, and I've been super critical of it. This is not brand loyalty or being a hypocrite about it. I just like, there's so many great stories you can tell that fit in the structure of the world pro wrestling creates. Some wanted poster that doesn't exist that you buy at the state fair with your photo on it while you pose with some cowboy hat. That's just sidebar comedy stuff that doesn't belong on a major national wrestling show, in my opinion, that I feel kind of strongly about.
No, you're absolutely right. That performance Bandido had on Saturday, did you guys have a chance to actually watch the match in full?
I did, and to me, it's one of my favorite kind of like TV matches of 2025.
Yeah, and it was interesting, Wade, because Bandido, obviously, they of kind of putting over like, hey, he hasn't actually been in a ring in 635 days, which I was like, that doesn't sound right. And I was like, sure enough, yes, that was actually correct information.
Yeah.
And they put over, he's now 210 pounds, and you can kind of tell now seeing him live. He obviously is electric in the ring, but wearing a mask, he emotes facial expressions extremely well. And when I watched that match, Wade, I know, not to continue to have this conversation because WWE's been trying to find a replacement for 3 decades now for Rey Mysterio. Like, if I was, WWE, I would want to try to scoop him up immediately because I feel like he's the type of guy they've been trying to look at on television. Because I mean, it's been like 2 years since we've seen him, so it's like we've kind of forgot. So I really hope they kind of go with him, but that's just kind of my tangent. But also, Wade, I feel like, okay, you kind of gave me what I was thinking, but you were more articulate, and I don't feel as because people are just like, you're just being grumpy. I'm just like, no, that was like really dumb. I didn't really care for it.
I'm completely with you guys. It confused me because I thought the setup was going to be Jericho setting a bounty because he viewed Bandido as a threat for his world championship, and then halfway through, commentary began treating it as legitimate. And so did Big Bill, and it just completely went off the rails for me. Brian, yes. I'm completely with you. I think Bandido is one of the most incredible looking wrestlers, and in the ring on the AEW roster. It's such an overused word at this point, but the man has an aura about him that really, a presence about him that really no one else has. Once Takeshita inevitably drops the international title, I think Bandido would be such an incredible person to have a run with that title. He feels like someone who could go and like tour around the world as an AEW representative in the way that Takeshita's been doing over in New Japan. I think that would be an incredible spot for Bandido. The man is freakishly athletic, freakishly strong, which is not something we see from a luchador all the time.
Yeah, the fact that you can do a one-armed gorilla press is pretty... It's a great feature. And speaking of like presence, if you want to talk, use the old JR-ism, who passes the airport test? I don't know if you guys have talked about her yet. Megan Bain.
Yeah,
she's. I mean, I was blown away about her size. She's got her excellent look. I mean, she's really crisp in the ring, and I'm so glad after just existing in AEW's like sphere for a while, not being used and. She can be used for Mercedes. Is she hurt? She was doing Stardom stuff for a while, and there was obviously like mixed reports that is she on the roster? Is she signed? I'm so glad she's there because I feel like she just adds something else, and she kind of like to me she kind of feels like that gap Jade Cargo had as far as like that star like stop down presence where if she walks in the room right now, like we'd all stop what we were doing because it's just like, my God, like who is this lady?
And say what you will about the AEW women's division over the years, but they've lacked that, and it's why Jade Cargill, as green as she was and protected as she was, they're like, oh, here's someone who looks like a star, because a lot of the women just, I mean, and, Mercedes showing up and having the ring gear that she does and the ring outfits, it's like that's, high-end stuff, and AEW just wasn't keeping up, not just with WWE, but with society, like in terms of what you expect a star to look like. And I mean, and Frank, I mean, I made fun of Kenny Omega looking like he rolled out of bed, went to the gym and showed up and walked to the ring and never thought a second about his weird, awful dated haircut and that nobody makes enough fun of. And his sweatpants. And, I thought people were unfairly critical of Will Ospreay. I thought Ospreay had kind of a contemporary look of a guy who, goes to the mall and has a distinct idea of the sweatpants and the shirt that's going to look cool for a guy who's around 30, who's an athlete. So, but there at times you just felt like not enough thought was being put into it, or the women are trying, but it looked like, home weekend home project more than a professional getting paid to do it and really make it work. And so that's important. I mean, some people don't want to think it's important. They just want to think about star ratings and high spots and crowd chants, but like that counts for a big part of the audience. That is a vibe that gets given off in AEW, men and women. But the women are going to get scrutinized more because they don't generally in AEW haven't had the star power boost of being ex-WWE or ex-New Japan headliners. You need to make up some ground because of that. Unfairly, but you do. It's the reality. Yeah.
It's so incredible. Thank you. Sorry, Brian. It is also incredible how much Megan Bayne feels like a hoss. And I'm not trying to, make any comments about her size, but she feels like big in a way that a lot of the other women, even the women that are as tall and physically comparable to her, like Chris Statlander or Camille, have been. Like I know what you mean. I'm 6'2". I'm not a small guy, but I can feel myself shrinking in my seat when Megan Bayne comes on screen. She feels larger than life and like imposing in a way that really no one has in the AEW women's division up until now.
Yeah, I believe she might be close to 6 foot, if not 5'11". So she's definitely, because I will tell you guys, she made such an impression on me. I remember her from AEW Dark because she had like a similar kind of persona back when AEW Dark was still a thing. And I saw her and I was like, why is this lady not on television? She's something. But, God bless, she got, I believe she had a really serious injury. So that's why she's been in and out of television for a while. I'm just glad that she's getting, I feel like, not like I'm eating crazy pills, but I felt like when I saw her, it like at the time, because, you'll see somebody and like, oh, maybe they could be really something. And it's like, ooh, what was I thinking? But like, just the fact of my memory of her 5 or 6 years ago, I feel like has translated and hopefully like it will eventually.
A couple of chat room comments about Bayne. Zach Barber says, really good rollout for Megan Bayne so far. 27 Newsman says, yes, Bayne is awesome and makes Statlander look like Omega and the Omega and sweatpants you described. Indie-rific.
That's such a great way to describe it. Yeah. I'm going to steal that.
I mean, I would say indie-rific a lot, but I don't want to overdo that phrase. But a lot of times I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking that and then thinking what's a more what's a different way to say it, because I think it applies a lot. A lot of what AEW has done with the presentation of talent.
Yes.
I am David Bryant says Bayne versus, this is a whole PWTorch contributor get together here. Bayne versus right. He writes Collision hits and misses. Bayne and Statlander could be a really good match. Zach Barber, speaking of PWTorch contributors, sign me up for Megan Bayne versus Chris Statlander right now. Zach adds she's a much better version of what they wanted Camille to be. So don't botch this, AEW, Tony Khan. Like, you're onto something. Don't wait too long. Don't find reasons not to. Don't let politics get in the way. Make her your new Jade Cargill or whatever. Yeah. So, okay, I want to, Brian. I want to bring up another segment and talking. Yes. I forgot what it was. So let me. Samoa Joe and Hook. And Shibata winning the squash, and then the Samoa Joe promo. I've dropped Samoa Joe's name multiple times as somebody who I think is like really talented on the mic when he talks quietly and intense. I think there's a sophistication and nuance to his promos when he's not frothing and yelling, which he's done too much. Did I say that? Yes. But this was a good example. He is this alpha guy. It's like people have been asking us, what are we about? Comes up with a name for the faction, issues a challenge, kind of short and sweet, but authoritative. I interviewed
makes you laugh.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I've been an advocate for the dynamic with Samoa Joe and Hook. I think that's a really good veteran, mentor protege type dynamic. I hope they do more with that. And when I see Brian Cage and Lance Archer come out, and then you see Hurt Business holding the tag belts, and then you imagine Samoa Joe and Hook staying together as a team and maybe getting in the mix there, and then you have the Young Bucks come back. It's not dream match Lucha Brothers versus the Young Bucks versus it's not like the so-called in FTR. It's not that like dream match New Japan PWG tag. It's a different kind of tag team division, but it's there. And sometimes you work with what you have, and I think it could be like really good. And then you add Buddy Murphy and Brody King to the mix also, if they protect them and build them up. the tag division can suddenly become the heavyweight tag division of
The
pro
meat
wrestling.
division.
Yep,
The meat division.
Yep.
No, wait, it's interesting because shout out to my co on the Collision Cafe. That was kind of like our New Year's resolution wish for AEW to kind of like disrespect to the private party. I mean, they were fine. But I really thought pivoting to the Hurt Business was first and foremost great. I think from start, like their presentation so far has been flawless to me. I think MVP has been great. Shelton Benjamin.
No. MVP has not been great. He's been long-winded and boring. Stop treating him like he's better than he is. I mean what I'm saying. Like there were a few weeks ago, he was on Dynamite and he just droned on and on. Like everyone was hanging on his every word, and he talked like this for 8 minutes and in the same tone, and people are like praising this, and I'm pushing back on that. And he did like 2 shows in a row, and I ripped on it. And by the way, he hasn't done it since. I'm taking credit. Maybe just, they want to establish his character, but I think he is terribly overrated. And then he goes into Chicago as at that time they were tending to be heel act. He starts putting over Chicago great athletes and they get cheered. What's your job? At that time they were supposed to be a heel faction, or if they weren't and they were on a journey, I don't buy that. I don't buy they were on a journey to land in a babyface spot. So it's like he's out there undercutting his babyface opponents by giving shout outs to Chicago superstar athletes, getting hometown pops, and then he's talking at a pace like the guy at the party who's hosting, and he's the big deal, and no one wants to interrupt him, but he just goes on, and he talks like this, and it's like, when is he going to finish? Because you're not that witty, and you could have made this point a lot quicker. You don't just have to fill 7 minutes if you can cover it in 2. That's how I felt for those 2 promos. But I say that, honest criticism, it sounds harsh, but I'm critical of it the way I'm about wrestlers who are really good on promos, who yell. Like, just get to your point and change up your cadence. Someone needs to just go, dude, that's not good television. And maybe people are telling you it's good, but it's not. What you're talking about, Brian, though, is the other stuff he does that is good. But if he's a babyface, and it's a challenge as a babyface manager, but he can be, when he doesn't just say, I'm here to fill 12 minutes when I could do it in 2, and you hang on to my every word, and I'm just going to talk slow, all that stuff. He can be really good as a babyface manager because he's not as a heel. He's not going to sell like a heel manager should. That's not his gimmick. He's a kind of a judo. What they say? He's a judo tough guy now, or jujitsu, whatever he's been doing in his spare time. Like he's not going to be selling or screeching or running away like a villain. So his role should be the guy who's cool and kind of cutting down the heels in a way that works, but it's more short and sweet. And like on commentary, you see glimpses of that where it's like, that's what we like about MVP. So I had to jump in because like I feel like sometimes people just, the default mode is to praise somebody because they're good, and it's like you got to look for times when they're not to make them better, or at least pull examples out of where it's not working and there should be a course correction.
No. I like that actually very much. It's not something I actually didn't consider, Wade, but like you just mentioned, like as far as MVP talking, like I'm thinking more like when he's on commentary, because he is incredible on commentary. Like he does, like I feel like he does like, well, as a heel, he would still put the babyface over, not bury him. Like, so it's good stuff. But like from start to finish, I mean, Shelton Benjamin's introduction of not being like a stooge, kind of just like sidekick guy, and Bobby Lashley. And now that they like whatever happened between, maybe they'll revisit Swerve and Lashley at some point, which is fine. But like this, like you said, Wade, sometimes you just have to like make the best of what you have. And so this is so far and above what they had and like in last year, because you had guys that, I've been pretty critical of this on the Collision reviews. I don't know if some of these younger guys want it. And like, if I feel like I'm for you being employed, but if you're kind of just happy to be there, I would much rather the company go in a different direction where it's a little bit more exciting on television. And something I really liked, as far as the booking and agenting of these, like how this division could be, Wade, they made this a nice, impactful 10 minutes. That was great. I really, really loved that, because you don't need to have a 30-minute epic. Like, and no offense to these guys, because they're, for their age, they are freaks of nature. I don't know how they look the way they are, because I even asked my wife one time.
I do.
Well, I I asked my wife how old like Shelton Benjamin looked, and she said 32, and I said no, try almost 50. It's just it's amazing. But like perception for them, we hurt people. It's a thing now. They're over, and I'm glad. It's just because, like, honestly, they're Bizarro Death Riders because they're cool. They checks and championships. Ever since MVP has come into the company, they've done exactly what he said. They make sense. They like are still cool. I really liked how Bobby and Shelton last week kind of like no-sold the Guns last week. And shout out to the Guns. I think they worked and bumped their butts off to the match entirely and made them look like monsters. And the fact that you're getting a potential monster match with Archer and Brian Cage, that sounds like a bomb fest that could be a really fun, entertaining 10 minutes. So sign me up for that.
I mean, I just want to jump in as well. Like, I'm right there with you, Brian. I love the pacing of Hurt Syndicate matches because they've understood more than anything that if your shtick is we will absolutely overwhelm the opposition, this match cannot go like a 30-minute epic. But they found the balance between, you know, a squash match that doesn't do much for their opponents and having a short, concise match that ends with them getting a decisive victory. You know, the Guns looked incredible in defeat, which is not easy to do when your match is at the 10-minute mark only. And, you know, this ties back what we were talking about, the Guns tag title run. That was, for me, the first moment where they felt like a main event tag team, especially the many-men entrance. They came out here, they looked like stars. They were looking up at the lights. They still looked like stars. And, you know, I don't really know how to quantify it because there's a very fine line between going out on your sword when you're unmatched and just getting squashed. But I think the Hurt Syndicate, more than any other kind of heavyweight heel group across any promotion, has found that balance.
Yeah, and shout out to the agenting throughout the match. And maybe this could have been more in the Texas crowd. The Texas crowd didn't want to boo either of these teams. Like it was,
I was wondering about that.
The middle. Yeah. It was because you got Guns up. We want Hurt People, but eventually we Hurt People kind of overtook the Guns. But like the Guns still got great reactions. Like nobody wanted to boo anybody, and I don't know if that's more of an agenting thing of understanding. Hey guys, let's not have just a generic. Hey, like you're going to take some heat here. We're going to be MVP is going to be a heel. Blah blah blah. But like they played this down the middle, and I think this was really good, and it just kind of shows this is the direction. And then eventually if you get FTR involved, the Young Bucks, you can have 15-20 minutes, and then like the smaller guys selling for Lashley and Shelton sounds like a really fun perspective.
I wish the return for the Guns, are they Tage, are they going to be are the Guns going to be heels or baby faces a month from now?
I mean, I would say baby faces based on their performance tonight and the fact that they will most likely continue aligning with Jay White.
So, and I hope not. I would like to see. I mean, I think it brings back bad memories of this derivative gimmick that with I don't know. I didn't think they fit well together. I think they held each other back. Honestly, I think Jay White. I think the Guns have done more comedy derivative, badass Billy Gunn, fan fiction promo, derivative promos, which I wish they didn't do. I talked about that last week and wrote in my report. Like, why are the Guns after time away coming back and doing nostalgia of their dad? I'd stop, like, come up with new stuff. Like, just like when Jericho showed up, he goes, I'm not Y2J anymore. I'm more creative than that, and I don't have the trademark for that. So let's do other stuff. I wish the Guns reinvented themselves. And I don't think so I asked that Ernest, like, where are they going to be in a month? Because if they're going to be baby faces, why come back and go opposite of Hurt Business, who are also on the verge of being baby faces? MVP's given a shout out to Private Party, saying they were good, speaking more respectfully, saving his ammunition for heels who deserve it, which will be good when it happens. So to me, like, I just thought that was a bad fit for the Guns' return. One, I just didn't want to see them doing the gun puns. It's just like, let's do something new. Yes, Billy Gunn was a name he was given when he had a Western gimmick in the 90s with a guy named Bart Gunn. It doesn't mean almost 40 years later, we should still be doing derivative chants about it and puns because, oh, Gunn, hey, that's a word that isn't just a last name. Like, they're talented. I mean, like, Austin and Colton are talented. They have a presence. Like, I think Colton Gunn, like, if he could break away from being this, derivative pun machine for the word gun and doing his dad's shtick and be his own guy, I think there's star there in Austin. I've seen him outside of the ring, hanging out with Max Caster at that rap show. It's like, he's super talented rapping too. Like, I want to see these guys. That's my frustration with AEW. People just take this path of least resistance to get a nostalgia pop. And it's like, come up with your own stuff. You got you were going to be on after the NBA All-Star festivities. You got a big audience on today's cable standards. Use it to make a name for yourself instead of doing nostalgia stuff. So I have an issue with that with the Guns, but also, and I talked about this last week, so I'm sorry for repeating myself, but why match two baby faces against each other? The Hurt Business are trying to establish themselves now as baby faces. The Guns are trying to establish who they are, and they were gone for a while. And now you make fans choose? Like, go ahead, Tate.
I actually do have an answer for this specifically. And that's because for me, and Brian, I'm curious to see what you think about this as well. The Hurt Syndicate remind me of a boxer and a boxing manager, but dropped into the world of pro wrestling. Like MVP's style of like showing some respect to their opponents while still being very braggadocious. It reminds me of Don King or Customato from back in the day.
That's good.
So I think that was a great choice for the Guns, because it looks like the theme of the Guns kind of babyface turn will be taking ownership of their legacy and what they did. Look, like, what has been the crux of the Guns heel persona for their first year in AEW? Dissatisfaction with the name Ass Boys. What did we see the first time they came back? They confronted the Hurt Syndicate, essentially them acknowledging, yeah, Ass Boys, that's what we are, that's who we are. Sure, they accepted that for the first time. What did we see, during their match tonight? They accepted their loss with grace, and they said, yeah, you know what? You won. You were the better man. It was a good fight. It feels like an evolution of their personas into the most like complete versions of themselves, even with Jay White. And this is where I disagree, where you said they held each other back.
Yeah.
That felt like, Jay White was kind of teaching him like the way of being a weasel. Their heel antics, it felt like they were just given the space to just run wild, like cheat, steal, and like do everything they possibly could. This feels like, all right, we've gotten that out of our system, and now I've got like a more realized core to fight with honor. That's where I feel like this is going for, and that's why I think matching them with the Hurt Syndicate was a great platform. It allowed them to be adults in defeat in a way that I don't think any other heel group would have been.
Let's get to our conversation with Rude Dog, which is, do we give them that much credit? And I hope you are proven right, because it's a great if that isn't what they're planning on, pretend it was and stay on the course you just laid out, Chase. Like that's good. Yeah. No. Yeah.
This time this feels cohesive enough.
Yeah.
Because starting with that is a really pronounced statement, this to me feels intentional. This one feels intentional.
Yeah, no. Yeah. And you made a good case. And if the idea was, all right, we're gonna take people on a journey. We're not gonna show up and be different. We're gonna show up be the same, but in a month we're gonna be different. We're gonna grow. You're gonna watch us grow away from something that got a little one note, repetitive, whatever adjectives you use. And you're gonna see us grow into something different through experience, or through showing you with our actions that we are different, or circumstances you watch us in live on TV or on one day delay. You're going to see us become different based on our experience that you're watching with us. And I think, wrestlers taking fans on a journey is better than someone going off TV and coming back and just going, we're different now. That said, it's still dangerous. I would have needed to be talked into even saying Ass Boys in the Guns' presence on television after they had their time away. To me, I don't think you need to have them disown that or own it and try to jujitsu it into something that is not an insult. Like, I just wouldn't have brought it up anymore. I think it was just, it felt juvenile and whatever. It fit in that other era. It's not the end of the world if they're going to either disown it or take ownership of it in a different way than their opponents intend. But it goes to all the stuff they were doing with Jay White. I mean, Jay White adopted the Gun stuff, as the chat room was pointing out. And it's like, yes, Billy Gunn used that word because he was part of the Smoky Guns tag team 35 years. Let's not, let's grow beyond that. The Gun name should be more of a burden than something you base every catchphrase on. It's like, it's played out. It's tired. You're more talented. My phrase should be, you're more talented than that. About Hangman death threats, about Samoa Joe yelling, about the Acclaimed hanging out with Billy Gunn. Now the Gun's doing Gun. You're all better than that. Stop it. You got a national platform. Be original. and use that TV time to establish who you are. It's that. And so with the Guns, it's like I am advocates for them. I was touting them when they were on Dark doing good work, when everyone thought I was crazy. And I go way back thinking that Colton and Austin, especially Colton, stood out to me because he came around late. There is something there. And if they keep talking about guns up and guns out and guns this and everyone's going to think, oh, they're the sons of Billy Gunn and they're a mid-card tag team act. It's like, be men. They're like, do something new. Do something. Jericho reinvented himself when he didn't have to because he knew it was important to rotate the crops, to have fresh soil. Don't look like you're just an ongoing nostalgia act constantly with no new ideas, living off the past.
Yeah.
I mean, though, sorry, Brian. Sorry.
Go for it, Tosh.
Zach Barber says it was a Bullet
yeah.
Club pun, nothing to do with Billy Gunn. He wants to say that.
Thank you, Zach. That's what I was going to say. I was going to argue.
Yeah.
I would argue it has grown away from Billy Gunn's legacy because when they joined Jay White, I thought he was taking them under their wing as Bullet Club Gold as they were at the time.
Right.
You know, it felt like saying this thing that you've been saddled with, you can turn it into something new if you team with me.
Wait,
and that's why.
Okay, no, I told you. I get what you're saying, but let's not take the fourth Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of Bullet Club as a defense of something fresh. Like that's where you are right now. That is flimsy ground to stand on. Because the argument is Jay White should have abandoned the Bullet Club thing. That felt less derivative than the Smoking Guns reincarnated with Billy Gunn. Right. But honestly, like people were like, "Oh, Jay White, Tony Khan wants to do Bullet Club in 2023." It's like, come on. So I would say, if you say my criticism is they're not glomming off of Billy, it's a more bullets, and it's like, is that why they're together, bullets and guns? Like, let's have better reasons than that to form a faction too.
You know what? That's fair. I hadn't considered that. I hadn't considered that as much. That is very fair.
Yeah. And Wade, I actually want to agree with Taj, where I actually agree there could be potential pathway for the Guns to have actually personal growth and a story as faces, because for all intents and purposes as a tag team, they haven't really had that opportunity. And I think of within the next, let's say maybe 4 months, at some point, eventually we're going to get this FTR turn. And I think they would be the perfect kind of first main program as baby faces, because in the interim they can have matches with Leo Rush and Journey on Collision, just kind of stay on the peripheral of just like, hey, we're still here. And I don't necessarily hate a tag team, AEW kind of having a mid-card tag team feud. That sounds actually really important to add to the depth of the division. And like Taj was saying, like with it, if we kind of measure like their journey within the quarters, so like within 4 months, like let's revisit this conversation and say, wow, the Guns are on pay-per-view wrestling the FTR in some type of like blow-off match. Like that's, and then within that 4 months, are we going to see the Guns versus the Young Bucks? And then after that, are we going to finally see them maybe have this culmination of winning the titles after year? Because I think Taj is actually onto something, Wade, where I think if they do this correctly, this is the journey Private Party should have had when AEW started. Like this, it was right there for them, especially since they laid out the Young Bucks. But something I would love to know more about, like you said, Wade, I don't really care about the Guns' history with his father. I want to know more personally about Austin Gunn. Like, show us, show up, like, do things. Like, I want to know who you are. Why should I care about you as a person? Like, relate to me. Like emote. Like, I want to know you. Like, why should we care about you eventually winning the tag team titles?
That's my whole thing. When I say be better than that, what I mean is you are yourself. You are your own person. Like,
yes.
Who are you? And when you settle for being the son, like don't be the son of The Rock or Steve Austin. Like David Sammartino was saddled with being the son of the biggest star in the Northeast for the, and he never had a chance. And so the Guns don't have a chance to carve out their own identity. And you know what? Some people aren't talented enough and they got to live off the name. You know what I mean? Like but the Von Erichs were the sons of Fritz Von Erich, and they were entirely different wrestlers. They were different from each other, but they were more similar than they were to their dad. And yet they turned out to be one of the biggest stars of the early 80s into the mid 80s. They weren't living off what their dad did. Now, Greg Gagne kind of had to live off of what Vern did. I mean, Greg wasn't awful. There's a lot of Steve Austin and I have talked about what we love about Greg's hot tags, showing fire. I mean, there's things, his earnest. I think his promos, his interviews, they weren't called promos back then because there was a guy holding a microphone. Guys didn't hold their own microphone back then. But Greg showed a level of believable, earnest intensity that I would show it in every promo class. It wasn't fancy. There was he wouldn't have gotten social media likes or wouldn't have been, there weren't catchphrases. He just was a guy that you just bought into, that he took what he was doing seriously. And so but he couldn't be Vern, but he wasn't. So when you're the sons of another act, you wouldn't pick Billy Gunn to be the son of. I'm sorry. If you're as talented as Austin and Colt Marr, you know what I mean? You wouldn't, unless your only hope is to do a nostalgia derivative tag team act that's mid-card. And I want them to aspire to be more. I think there's more there than living off of something that, frankly, 20 years ago was a nostalgia act and tired. So,
right.
Yeah, that's why I love the one vignette they did teasing the Guns' return before they came back this time around, showing their home life.
Yes, thank you.
That was the most interesting they've been since their inception.
Yep. And if Austin can rap, doesn't mean he should, but if you can make it work, that's a talent that is different than what Billy has. But frankly, if Kevin Von Erich could rap, I don't think he should have. I think Von Erich that would have helped the war with the Freebirds and all the crowds they drew.
Leave the rapping to Harley Cameron.
By the way,
that was incredible. By the way,
yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I can real quick,
Brian, if she's watching the show, she's like, "Hey guys, I did that cool video. Why don't you talk about me?"
Yo, don't worry. The puppet bit of merch of those puppets they're gonna sell at those merch stands. They were gonna fly off the shelves quicker than those Lily dolls, because they did a good job making that. Like, it honestly, because that was if I had a young child that wanted that toy, I would totally give it to him. They'd be like, "Oh, Daddy, can you buy me that Mercedes Monet puppet?" Well, I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna sound like Harley Cameron, but I'll try." I think that's like a great bit of business and thoughtfulness. And I am just so incredible because, Wade, I've been kind of like, I don't want to say a Harley Cameron day oneer, but I've always just been impressed where she's outpunched her last young lady has 30 matches in her Rolodex, but you can tell she's gradually, it might not be like, she's at this level of Roxanne, Perez, as far as like getting it real quick, but you can see gradually the improvements. And that's what I want to see, especially so much time for this program. I want to just be able to latch on to Harley Cameron and say, whoa, you're just not like a bit player. You actually love this. You want to get better. And it's unrealistic to expect everybody to go to the New Japan Dojo like Layla Gray, but like, I admire her so much for showing all of her talents, because she can sing, she can act. She's probably going to be a voiceover actor in the next Inside Out at some point. Like, just tremendous little segment. And maximize your minutes. Good Lord.
There you go.
And shout out for her being the highest quarter hour of Collision last week. Harley, they did wait, did you see how they advertised that throughout the show?
The what?
The Harley halftime show, segment.
Oh, no.
Okay, so this was actually
that
really
was rare.
it was a cute.
I read all about it, but yeah.
We're right. So it was a cute naming of the segment first and foremost.
Yeah.
But they, how they used to do the little ticker for Swerve.
Yeah.
They did that for Harley.
Yeah.
And I think, as silly as that sounds, I think that helps.
It's like the Cody Countdown clock in WWE.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It's very silly, but I think that helped tremendously. And I think that was one of the highest quarter hours Collision's had in a while. So good for her.
Yeah. When you build AEW, you can learn. Sometimes there's the argument, people tune in, they watch, and nothing will change. If you promote something, you're flagging it as a big deal to fans, and they're like, if they're flagging this, I ought to stick around and see what it is. It won't work for everything, but Harley is making a connection with fans. The critique is and this gets to the Gunther thing of, Jay, you're not a WrestleMania worthy opponent, so I'm gonna make your life miserable if you choose me. Harley says, I haven't been wrestling that long. But you know what? There was a time when I didn't know how to sing. The implication being I can now, or play guitar. I can now, or perform ventriloquism. Is that it? Be a ventriloquist? I don't
Yes.
know. Yeah. Do you perform ventriloquism, or are you just a ventriloquist? I'm not. Either way,
there's a verb for it, but I don't remember. Yeah. I think like ventriloquize is actually a word.
Seriously? Oh, I love it.
Never heard anyone
say it. Yeah.
Didn't
know.
And then she goes, or speak Chinese, and then the next words out of her mouth are Chinese, and she's like channeling John Cena here. I'm sure she's way more not articulate, well versed in Chinese than John Cena. Although credit John Cena, he knew a market and he wanted to go after it. So. David, by the way, I just cut as I'm talking. David Ryan goes, we're 2 episodes away from finding out she's an underwater astronaut and professional tightrope walker.
That is incredible.
So she owned the idea that she hasn't wrestled. She hasn't wrestled long, and in a sense, she hasn't earned a title match in a way. But what she did is, as Zach Barber points out, she's unbelievably talented. She used her talents to agitate her way to a title shot to endear herself to fans. There's a way that you can tell that story well, and I think they could have told that story better than AEW has. I think this is one of those things where they stumbled into something, and now you can see them embracing it, and that's good. I mean, that's a good thing, because who saw this coming? I feel like it's a little unfortunate. It's later this week that the match happens. Like I think it'd be nice if you stumbled onto this 7 weeks ago instead of 2 weeks ago. Like, so that's the only thing, is they've got something with her. Let's accentuate the strengths. Let's, camouflage, mask the weaknesses. Let's really care for this in the way they were talking about Bane earlier, Megan Bane. Like, you want, like, now if you're going to get in the business of Harley Cameron, don't just throw her on TV half-heartedly. Like, really cultivate and protect her and feature what is working. And I'll, sidebar caveat, I'm not going to get super excited about, as excited as you are, Brian, about popping a quarter-hour rating or a minute-by-minute rating. I don't think that stuff, it's indicative of something you want to build on, but in and of itself, it's not a victory. It can be a distraction. The things that really are going to grow a company are things you do now that pay off 3 months from now, and that you do consistently. If I lift weights for 2 days, I'm not going to celebrate that I'm got the muscle mass and toning that I want. There's things you got to do slowly. If you overindulge at the gym one day, you're going to injure yourself and you're not going to work out. So, like, my point is, wrestling success is not built on, oh, wasn't that cool? We did a ticker and it was the biggest quarter hour of a show that not that many people watched. Like, it's good. It's not bad, but that's not the holy grail of successful wrestling booking and promoting. What it is seeing things through and having the patience to really put time in week after week after week for months. So I just want to put that in perspective.
For sure.
It's not. Let's not do what John Moxley's angry about and start partying over that. Yes, they popped a top quarter hour, minute by minute. It's good. I'm not taking that away from you, Brian. I just want to emphasize, we have not crossed it. That's recovering a fumble in your 10 yards from your end zone. You still got to score, and you still got to play another 58 minutes.
No, you're absolutely right, Wade. And like, data is like useful. It's just like how you use it, and and not just sit on your hands. They can't just be excited they had one good week. It's all about the follow up. And then with Cameron, I don't know this for a fact, but I kind of feel like maybe Mercedes really wanted to work with Harley, especially in Australia. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling they're going to get kind of like a Santino Marella type of moment in Australia, and it's going to just be magic. Now,
yep.
I really hope they timed this card out right. And I'm so sorry. That was the one thing I did actually really like about the show. All the in theory, Tony Khan likes to overload the shows. Since this is a collision show, you can't fit 10 matches on this card. This needs to be a nice and tight 5 to 6 range of a show. Yep. And especially like Harley and Matthews, they deserve at least 8 to 10 minutes minimum. So I'm glad they didn't try to shove those in there. But I think there's going to be a 2.999 moment, and the roof's going to come off that place. I'm already saying I'm calling that right now.
Now,
Which to be fair, no one excels in those moments better than Mercedes Moné. You know,
Yep.
I went to New Japan Strong Style Evolve last December. The local crowd did not know who Hazuki was, and by the end of the match, they were cheering for her like she was prime Stone Cold, because Mercedes did such a good job selling those like late finish kickouts.
Yes. So, word of caution: 4.5 years ago, Otis was the next big thing and the biggest star in WWE. You know, I mean,
didn't think that.
I was thinking they were gonna go with him for like two months as world champ. I mean, it was a weird time. And they were doing different things. But you know, Fandango was super over for a little bit. I mean, there's things that get over, and if you don't pace yourself and plan for the next thing, it can feel like a novelty. And so just the word of caution doesn't take anything away from what they're doing. And I don't think they're doing anything wrong. It's just, unfortunately, they don't have 7 weeks instead of 2 to really build this up, because they obviously the setting and the context and everything, they just got to do it. But don't make this seem like a fad. Really, I mean, that's just, and I don't even have the perfect answer for it. Because I got to see more of her to know what I think they should do. It's just, if you're in the business of, if you're Tony Khan and AEW, in their business of surviving, growing, selling more tickets, selling more pay-per-views, drawing in more viewers, you got to put the time in on this stuff. And you got to really, every situation like this that comes up, you gotta cultivate. You know, sometimes you just end up in one of those booth cash machines on the game shows, and it's like you got to learn quickly how to grab all the cash. And it's like you weren't expecting to be there, suddenly you are, and it's like, all right, I got to time this out. Like, that's what happens sometimes with wrestling stars. How do you turn this into money? But at the same time, let's think, where do we want to be in 3 and 6 months? Sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes it will burn out quickly. I think there's something here that won't. Fan Blast in the chat says, as good as Harley is, I can't help but think back to what Todd Martin's words on the VIP podcast, The Fix, is: the more silly stuff they do, even if it gets over, you come off as WWE light. And I don't think it necessarily has to be that, but it should be in the back of their minds. Let's not get so giddy that we sort of make it uncool or overdo it. You know, who is she long term? You know, it's like Bayley and NXT. Like, that was like, wow, this is kind of working, and let's have a plan, and let's think of some chapters we're going to tell and different opponents she's going to have, and what's her setback going to be, what's her story going to be, what's her challenge going to be, what is the next hill she has to climb. And like, you know, just and you know what, if you can always cut back, you can always just go, it's not working, but plan as if it will, if you put thought and planning into it. And so don't wing it. And you know, what else is here's Kyle Fissell goes, TK's track record is that she'll be in the witness protection program in a month if she loses. And David Bryan says, Kyle, I hate how right you are, but I pray you are wrong. So, you know, that's another thing, is a lot of times just shiny new toy, and then you move on to the next thing, and you know, there just wasn't planning for what's happening 2 months or a month from now. Yeah. Brian, did anything happen off camera, by the way?
No. Like, it was a pretty, like, you know, actually, it was actually a really cool moment. AEW gave away all-in tickets. I was asked, did I win the rock, paper, scissors challenge for a ticket? I said no, but hopefully I will be there in July covering the event for the Torch. So that's conflict of interest for sure. So I would have definitely given that away to somebody else that probably didn't have an opportunity, but that was nice. But other than that, no. Actually, very entertaining.
Hold on. Is WWE giving away a bunch of WrestleMania tickets? No, they don't have to.
Oh.
I'm sorry. No, clip
that if you're watching that. Tribalism. Here we go. Let's start a war on Reddit.
It's facts. It's fact. They actually, WWE, for all I know, is giving away, like, you know, doing some contest too. It was a self-aware deadpan cheap shot. But Brian, I want to know, you said there was a cool moment. I thought you were going to say that Tony Khan declared Austin, Texas the best wrestling city they visit. Did he?
I think he said this is one of my favorite cities to visit. This is going to be a great show. Normal Tony coming out and greeting us. He came out right after the final I believe the final one of the final RH matches we saw the Roses nephews, the Texas Outlaws. So that was fun. I don't know which Rhodes has like a long dusty hair. I forget which one that is, but it's long, it's blonde. So we'll see. They've got some work to do, but we'll see how they work out from the Dustin Rhodes kind of promotion that he's running. Blake Christian actually had a wonderful, like, really cool moment with Fuego del Sol. He kind of popped up in ROH. Really interesting that. I don't know what Blake Christian is doing to still attract heat. Like 6 months later, after that ROH show in New York, he's getting booed. Like, and that's like, I kind of admire that for a guy his size, because I'm not a big fella, but then when I look at him, I'm just like, ooh, if I'm kind of taller and bigger than you, then that's gonna probably not transfer over great on television. But no, he actually had a wonderful match with Fuego del Sol for anybody who watched ROH. Fuego got a great reaction. Good to see him back, because he's kind of doing. It seems like he's doing the rounds in Texas. So that was really neat. They were doing like more like a big luchador like kind of tag like after the show, but I was kind of ready to go home, and I was still like I'm ready to still like.
It's like when WWE do the 205 live tapings after the main live roster TV show, and it's
which is a shame because 205 Live was like a really good show. I actually rather enjoyed that for WWE content at the time. But yeah, obviously really good turnout for the show. I hope it like from you guys' perspective, it transmitted well. There wasn't anything else I had on my notes really. Oh, but can I actually get my Dictator John take in? I think what I'm really kind of like basically and lock and key on what's going on with the Death Riders right now, and I'll reshare this take again right now. But John Moxley currently reminds me of Taj. This might go over your head because I don't know how old you are or like how vast your cartoon knowledge is.
He's 26. He looks 26, right?
Oh, okay. So this will go over your head.
Sorry,
Taj.
You proud of yourself for that, Wade? Are you proud of yourself for that? I'm 24.
There was a whole theme a couple months ago.
Oh, funny. But John Moxley now reminds me of the cartoon villain Dick Dastardly. He's just missing the mustache, and the only thing he hasn't done, because he's actually tied up people, but he hasn't tied up Beth Phoenix to railroad tracks yet. And it really makes me just sad because I really love John Moxley because, like Wade, we've banged on the thing that draws me to Moxley. He was, always authentic. He would have these moments where, especially coming back from rehab, was just very heartwarming. He's always been there, for AEW anytime they've kind of had a pickle or needed to be the champion on the call kind of thing. And, I always harken back to that, match he had with Ishii because, like, I'm with you, Wade. He can actually go in there, and I think he underestimates how good of a pro wrestler he is. And, I think wasn't it Dave Meltzer that he said, when I knew this was going to be a 5-star match within 5 seconds when it started. He doesn't give himself enough credit for he is, and I wish he would just grow into that a little bit more. And it was interesting. The last couple shows. Oh, there we go.
Our audio listeners, I just put Dick Dastardly up on the screen. You'll have to Google him if you're listening to us.
Yeah, he's an evil cartoon villain. He
was he on Dudley Do Right, or is that just?
No. So he was on Wacky Races, and Wacky Races. That was.
I recognize him from my Saturday morning cartoon days back.
Yes,
in the day,
I believe 1970.
It was a Hanna-Barbera character.
Yes, it was. I knew you would like. I was like, oh, wait, don't get this. He knows. But that's like, and that's like the thing that's really
I'm older
just
than 26.
You're gonna gaslight me into thinking I'm 26. Oh my days.
Oh god. But AEW, I thought it was interesting. The last couple weeks, they've been kind of like putting the Death Rider segment early on the show, and it's like, guys, if you have your vegetables now, I promise you can have your dessert. And it's like, oh, okay, we're done with the Death Riders. We don't have to see them again. And it's like. And the thing that really kind of annoyed me, I don't know if you guys had a chance to talk about that trios match yet. Good in action, but why did we have to have a match that go 17 minutes where Roderick Strong took the heat for literally 8 minutes. One of my friends next to me, she looked over and said, is it me or has Roderick Strong been taking? Yeah, it's gone ages. And just to have it kind of end with a Wheeler Yuta low blow, and face promise on Collision that they were going to win the titles, and you kind of like proactively you found something that the Undisputed Kingdom could do. You found a lane, which like Adam Cole found a lane. Good for him. Very happy about that. So you kind of like undid all that work that was intentional potentially or unintentional, and you kind of made like a whole mess of the trio division. Maybe Samoa Joe and Hook and Spada can fix it, maybe, but I was really disappointed on the finish. What did that match have to go? Like if it goes 12-10, blow finish, I can. Yeah. It's fine, but. Board with Roderick Strong getting the heat for 8 minutes. It was entirely
it was a long time when Adam Cole got the hot tag, and I mean it was like then by the way, the ref when Cole got the hot tag and then chaos broke out, like all three members of Undisputed Era took turns beating up Pac. The ref is just making these like meaningless gestures, these impotent, meaningless, random arm movements, and it's just that took me out of the match. It's like it's a whole separate topic. AEW and the referees, the way the referees act, it's just ruining so much because. And that, like obviously when heels attack baby faces and the ref goes, I got no choice but to reward the pre-match attack by calling for the bell constantly. WWE doesn't do that anymore for good reason. And then you had the stupid situation where there's a save in the tag match, and so there's a near fall, and Claudio leaped with both feet onto the back of Kyle O'Reilly as he had Pac covered. And you know what happened after Claudio stomped him? Kyle O'Reilly was still on top of Pac. Pac's shoulders were still down, and the ref just chose to stop counting. And it's like, and this is like on Claudio. Like in Claudio, by the way, is the guy who like recently like made a save in a tag match. It's like I like practically stood up and applauded. That's how you make sure your partner doesn't get pinned. You dive into the ring and you shove them off with all your force. So this is about cleaning. This is about a bad habit in wrestling needs to be cleaned up, and I harp on it. But this was a prime example. Good wrestling going on. If I have to be burdened with this, I want everyone that listens to me to be burdened with it and see the things that I see. O'Reilly is still covering Pac. Claudio did not break up the pin. He reinforced it. He leaped onto the guy's back who was making the cover. He was still making the cover. The shoulder was still down. Pac did nothing to lift his shoulder. So it's actually mostly on Pac. If you're a wrestler out there and you hear this, or if you know a wrestler, text them and tell them if a match and you're in a tag match and your opponent makes the save, lift your effing shoulder. Don't leave your shoulder down because it makes the referee look stupid. And AEW referees are already too stupid for words. You don't make them look any. It puts them in a bad position. So that happened. And actually later on in the match, Yuta actually lifted his shoulder when Pac intervened. And so like it can be done. It can be done. So I had my two little side rants. I was going to save them for the Wade Keller hotline for poor VIP members, but now you all got to hear it.
You guys got a free preview.
No, it was great.
Yeah, but there was some good. There was some good action in there for sure, and I agree. The heat on Roderick Strong. It's like we're still doing this. So yeah.
Shout out to wait. It sounds like your ire is really more towards Rick Knox. Is that right?
God, he's not even on the top 4 list. No, he is. Yeah. Everybody, he's bad, but they're all. What are they supposed to do? Call for the bell? I have a chair in my hand, but I'm going to wait to turn around and drop it at ringside until I know the spot's about to happen where the heels interfere with it's all so the timing is just all off, and it's hard. It's hard. You got to practice, but it's come up with WWE is coming up with ways to have heels to jumpstart matches, but not call for the bell until it makes sense. And it's just one of those not hard to fix things that AEW and Tony Khan just doesn't have an eye for. I mean, some people have an eye for fashion, some don't. Some people have an eye for interior design, some don't. Whatever. Tony Khan does not have an eye for those types of details. It doesn't cross his mind as important because he's a high spot guy, but that stuff all adds up. It really does.
Is that more of an agency, Wade, or is that more of a booking perspective? Because to me, I if I'm like a young wrestler and I don't know any better, I would hope the producer or the agent would say, Brian, you get your effing shoulder off the mat. Like, because I don't. Is that Tony Khan's responsibility? Like, I mean, it is
Everything
and isn't. You know what I mean?
He watches
sure.
every AEW match. You should go, that looks stupid, and they should tell his agents, and then they should do their job.
For sure.
I mean, honestly, luck stops with Tony.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, regardless of if it's ultimately an agent's job or a producer's job, it definitely doesn't feel like something that's been prioritized by head office.
Right.
And when that happens, there's always going to be things like this that slip through the cracks and people notice.
It's honestly like breaking up tags. It's like flag football instead of tackle football. If you can run in the ring and touch your opponent on the back, then the ref has to stop his count. That's not the rule. The rule isn't if you interfere and touch the opponent violently or not, the ref has to stop his count. But that's how it's like flag football. I pulled the flag off. Now you got to stop running. No, you got to shove him off. You got to take the leverage away so that guy can lift his shoulder up. And the thing is when you see it, it's so much better. Like, it's so much more satisfying to see a pin get broken up because it actually got broken up and the person pulled their shoulder up because they finally could, because your partner took the pressure of leverage off your shoulder. It looks so much better. It's the same way why, like WWE is careful with camera shots now with like Penta doing dives and stuff. They don't film the people standing there going, I'm waiting to catch you. I'm waiting to catch you. They wait to the last second to show that. People in the building can see it. But like, there are ways to clean this up. And it's more immersive to clean it up. If you're making movies and there's something that doesn't look realistic, you clean it up. If you have a bad stuntman, you get a better stuntman. If you have a bad camera guy, you tell him, you film it better. Like, just clean this stuff up. It's sloppy and it takes me out of it.
No, that's. I'm going to start looking for this more. It's not.
You're like, burdened with it. You can't.
No, not burdened. I think it's like a good opportunity for me to actually look at it next time I'm watching a match. It's like, oh God, Wade was right.
Speak for yourself. I'm burdened with it. I'm never going to be able to unsee that.
But the good part is if you're not even thinking about it, it looks like you don't even know why, but it's just the breakup of a pin is so much better when the pin is actually broken up. Like, it feels like a more impactful moment instead of, we're just kind of going through the motions. It's like, the lucha style of whipping someone into the ropes, and Jericho picked up the bad habit, and when everyone was saying he's the greatest wrestler in the world, he was the only main eventer doing weak whips into the ropes. And if you watch his matches back in the aughts, like, you can't unsee how lazy his whips of his opponents into the ropes are. It's awful. And I couldn't unsee it when another wrestler pointed it out to me and said, I can never forgive Chris Jericho for these weak whips into the ropes. I can't unsee it, but it's inexcusable. The wrestlers shouldn't have to run themselves. A whip into the rope should look like this really strong guy got momentum and threw you, and you couldn't even stop yourself in those ropes, and then you have to suspend disbelief. The ropes have such a rebound effect that unless you just stumble and fall, you've got to just run, and then you hope to duck, but if you can't because you're groggy, you get hit. There's a way that works, and 45 years ago, wrestlers thought about that stuff. Somewhere in the last 35 years, people stopped thinking about it. They just, this is my time to pat you on the back, and you run the ropes voluntarily, bounce off, and run into me. That stuff, if you watch old wrestling, you see wrestlers who cared about that stuff, and then today's stuff looks so fake, and it's easy to clean up.
Yeah. No, I'm all about intent, Wade, because it irks me when there's no intent in a move. Because, like, I'll take Jimmy Hayter, for example. Some of my favorites is when she looks like she's about to take your head off and someone actually sells it as such. Like, even like with a brawl, like, let's say I just remember there was a brawl maybe a year or two ago. She rather than kind of being contrived, I'm going to just push you and act like I'm going to put you in my finish, she actually ripped back and looked like she was going to take somebody's head off. And I think for me, like, I think that's kind of like my ick, where it's like, if I don't see any intent in anything, it's really fake and phony, and it takes me out of it. Where I just you see the wires and the puppets, and it's like, it's not fun. Yeah,
I'll use a restaurant. Sometimes I walk into a restaurant and I like, you can tell at Chipotle that's poorly managed because there's just food splashed everywhere in every bin. There's like shredded cheese in the guac. There's shredded cheese in the guac, and there's pork in the tofu. It's like, just seriously, how hard is it to just like keep this sort of clean so I don't feel there's tons of cross contamination going on? And then you get your food and you look for a clean table and they're all dirty, but there's two employees standing around talking to each other. It's like that stuff. So then you walk into a restaurant, you can tell the manager who's meticulous, like the guy in Breaking Bad, who was a horrible evil person, but my God, did he run a great fast food place? Yes, it was clean and everything was well run. And so now, no, Zach says I'm bearing Chipotle. There's good and bad Chipotles. There's good and bad Chipotles. There's ones where you walk in and you're like, look at this. The manager makes the employees make sure they're not just sloppily dropping shredded cheese in the guac. I'm vegan. I don't want cheese in my guac. And I don't want, now I'm going to get go. Stir the pinto beans before I put it in my burrito, because the pinto beans on the top are not hot. So don't scoop from the damn top. Scoop from the bottom where the beans are hot. Okay, that's a whole separate issue.
Now, if Chipotle would like to be a sponsor of PWTorch at one time, we do have a coupon that you can actually sign up for. Is that right, Wade? What's the coupon?
I'm not doing another plug right now. By the way, backing me up here.
That is incredible.
Kyle Fassel says, I've walked out of Chipotle's like that. You should walk out of any place like that.
Yeah. Yep. I was gonna say, Zach, you think Wade's burying Chipotle? You have not been to some Chipotles in East LA where I am. They are nasty.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, my point in the restaurant analogy, though, is sometimes you can walk in and assess a situation, and you can just tell there's not attention to detail. And if you're going to consume food, you want to think there's some attention to detail because there's stuff you're not seeing. So the stuff, if they can't bother to make the stuff you're seeing look good, what's going on when you're not around? With wrestling, it's like when you watch a match and there's not, have you never watched one of your matches back and thought of anything other than, did I do a flip dive and the crowd pop? Like, do you watch, like, I've talked to so many, I've watched matches with wrestlers, like where they're like, look at this, or people text me if I compliment a match, and I've had wrestlers go, why you compliment? Did you not see that? Like, it's been beat out of me to not have an attention to detail. And when you see a match where there's that intent, as you put it, Brian, where you can tell they've thought about how all this stuff adds up. Clean tables, clean glass when you're staring at your ingredient. That all adds up to more confidence that the food's going to be good. And frankly, it's a sign the food will be, you won't have a stomach ache later. That's how wrestling matches should be. Clean, do the detail work, clean it up. It's free, it's easy, and it doesn't add risk or danger, or it doesn't add to your bump card. And there's so many wrestlers who get praised for being great, and it's this superficial stuff that it's a match that has high spots, but it's not immersive. People don't get pulled into it. They don't know why, but because it just looks fake. They don't watch it actively thinking it looks fake. It just does feel fake. And then you get Claudio a month ago, and he just I should have memorized what match it was. He just knocked the opponent off of his partner, like forcefully. And you're like, everybody should do that. Matches would be way more entertaining if that kind of detail was there.
Now, wait, it'd be funny if that was the match that ended in a DQ finish, because it might have been.
It could have.
We go back and watch. Yeah, we go back and watch. Wade has like 20 other criticisms of it. That's incredible.
Yeah. Zach says he did that tonight too. So yeah, it was up to Pac to lift his shoulder. I'm not even blaming Claudio, but anyway. Deep breath. Brian, anything else? You've set a record for on-site correspondent time, but you've earned it. Speaking of plugs, plug your podcast.
Yes. So weekly at the Collision Cafe for VIP subscribers, myself and my co-host Amina Jenny. We obviously talk about Collision, AEW, and obviously we'll be on tomorrow talking about Collision from last week, my on-correspondent experience, and actually previewing AEW Grand Slam. Should be a lot of fun. It's easy breezy. I feel like Amin and I have a nice little, we have a broad conversations that we'll kind of go on tangents like we just did.
Terrible podcast habits. No.
Yeah.
Stay focused.
So, hey, we do have a run sheet. We have a run sheet that we try to say too, but I mean, and one more thing before I go, who said, I want to try to remember this. When somebody was too tall, like you're overly too tall.
You're needlessly tall. Billy Gunn is needlessly tall. It doesn't
needlessly tall.
and for people who don't know, because it's been a while since I explained it. What I mean is, there's nothing about his presentation, nothing that says you're a significantly taller than average wrestler or significantly bigger. His style wasn't that. And by the way, BG James was needlessly big too. And And when I say needless, there's nothing about the gimmick that said I'm 6'5" and I'm a powerhouse, or it's like he wrestled like a guy who was 6 feet, like, or 6'1". So he is needlessly tall, and the needless part means so many wrestlers would stand opposite of BG and Billy in the ring, and you're like, are they tiny? Like, why they're so small? Because Gunn and James were Road Dogg. They were deceptively and completely unimportant to them getting over, completely unimportant to match quality, completely unimportant to their gimmick. They were just tall. BG James 6'3", 6'4", Billy Gunn 6'5". It did nothing for them other than make their opponents look surprisingly small next to them. So that's where it came from. He's needlessly tall. It gave him no benefit in his career. There's nothing about being 4 inches taller than he had to be. He was 4 inches taller than he had to be as over as he was, and it worked against his opponent. So that's the genesis of it, and now it's just a bit.
Right. Interesting. So it sounds like Enzo Amore stole your bit. It sounds like, he's. I mean, if you think about it,
yeah,
because you can't teach that.
Yeah.
But I know it's been a while. Yeah, like let's get on to that. But I'll go ahead and run, guys. But thanks for having us as always.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. We'll talk to you
thanks,
soon. Look forward to your podcast, Collision Cafe, VIP exclusive, except on weeks when the AEW Conversation Club takes a break. Then we give a freebie of you on the PWTorch Dailycast lineup. So go check that out. If you're not subscribing to the PWTorch Dailycast, they all come on the VIP feed when you take advantage of that $10 coupon. But if you're not going to do that, for sure, search PWTorch in your podcast app. Subscribe to the PWTorch Dailycast. The AEW Conversation Club will be out this week. And Joel and Greg will be talking about their thoughts on this episode of Dynamite and looking ahead to Saturday. Taj, we gone long, but we haven't gotten to emails yet. Do you want me to run through a couple of them, or do you want to run? I know you're West Coast, so maybe it's not too bad.
Well, let's see if anyone's got anything particularly interesting to say. I'm curious.
Original. Well, let's see. JB. JB has. I'm not kidding. 13 questions in this email. I'm sure he covered territory we already covered, so I'll be very selective here. He leads with the Max Caster thing. The Max Caster Best Wrestler Alive chicken shit heel gimmick has the potential to get a lot of wrestlers over. The contrast between him and Hangman was apparent tonight. Hangman received a star babyface reaction. There's no denying that Caster helped him earn that reaction. Kudos to Caster for understanding and buying into what a true heel is in today's wrestling. So is Caster going to find value being a jobber to the stars, so to speak?
In the short term, I say yes, because, I do think that in order for the Best Wrestler Alive gimmick to build to anything, you really need to set a precedent of a couple more squashes, which just means a couple more opportunities for a babyface to look amazing. I really want to see him against like a Powerhouse Hobbs or a Lance Archer, get him absolutely flattened in under a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But, I do think there's some merit to that.
I think Caster has a chance to become an upper mid-card cult babyface with some staying power after he gets done with this heel run. I would say he should have that in mind when he runs from wrestlers. Like, in the back of his mind, he should be going, in his mind, he should be, I'm pretending to be scared to lure them into a vulnerable position, rather than I just don't want to fight because I talk big, but I can't hold my own in the ring. And like, establish there's some credibility in the ring when he does wrestle these people. So he's not, Giovanni Vinci, who talked a big game and then just got squashed. Although, no, he's not. Okay. JB next. Is this slow burn to MJF Hangman worth the side mission that we're getting with MJF Jarrett and Dustin? I'm curious as to what MJF Hangman face-to-face will look like next week. And also, when do we get the conclusion of MJF and Jarrett and the first match of MJF Hangman? I'm curious how they pace that. Did they mention Jarrett this week?
I think they informally kind of wrote Jarrett off after he lost because MJF kicked him in the gentleman's area. I feel like they're gonna, and it feels like AEW does this a little bit more frequently, where they lean into like that old trope of someone goes home in kayfabe to nurse their wounds for a couple of weeks, then comes back with like a renewed kind of vigor and motivation.
So I'd
like to think so. I don't think they just write off Jeff Jarrett after like the frankly really good babyface work he did in the later half of 2024, but fairly obvious this was a pivot after the abysmal segment between Jarrett and MJF that went like 10 minutes and talked about Karen Angle for some reason.
Yeah. I'm I'm curious to see, do they think they have more legs and we're going to lull and then hit a peak, or did they have that in mind? And Tony's like, I'm taking too much heat for being, I can't believe they said, the all elderly wrestling. Was it elderly? Yeah. That MJF said last week. Like, wow, you're putting it. Do you really want to say that? Cause that's sort of been a knock that has some merit in terms of how many, old people were getting substantial TV time at the expense of others. But I'm wondering if they pulled the plug on it or if they'll rev it up and try to get, another TV match or two out of it or something.
I mean, they've talked about, this being Jarrett's retirement year. I don't think they just write that off, especially knowing how Tony Khan treats these old legends. I think either Jarrett or Dustin or both of them get a last hurrah at All In Texas. If I had to place my bets on something, I see Jarrett most likely tagging with Jay Lethal, getting, kind of a Jarrett's last match celebration. Not as big as Sting, but, something to that level.
How about Jarrett beats Max Caster in his retirement match?
I mean, hey, look, when Jarrett comes back, if Caster's still doing this thing, I want to see Jarrett squash Caster. That'd be a great way to get. Yeah.
So honestly, I don't think people be. I mean, Jarrett shouldn't do an 8-minute promo given his, running down his Wikipedia page of his entire history again. But Jarrett brings a lot to the table when he's not filling more TV time than he ought to be. Yeah. And Jarrett interacting with Max could be a fun. Like that might be more.
It's a fun pairing.
Yeah, that could be a fun pairing, and more than just a TV. It could be. They could turn that into something kind of fun. All right.
Yeah.
JB says, so far I like the prospects of Megan Bayne in AEW. I think that I'd like to see her against Mercedes in the not too distant future. Essentially, what we never got in the sudden ending to Mercedes Camille. In the meantime, Bayne and Stat will be good. A women Haas feud. As far as Harley goes, JB says, I really enjoyed the Harley Cameron promo tonight. I think she's doing a great job of playing that organic underdog babyface to Monet's cocky, arrogant heel. She comes across as humble and sincere, but with a growing confidence that might make her formidable come Saturday in her home country. And let's see. I like the emphasis AEW put on the AEW title in the final segment with Copeland and White and Mox tonight. Mox truly seemed sincere in his desire to defend his title, and Cope used that desire to draw Mox out. My only qualm was Switchblade saying that he and Cope would put the Death Riders in the ground come Saturday. I roll, sad face, something. I can't tell. It's really small. Will Spike be making an appearance in the Brisbane Brawl? Oh, God.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
It's anything goes. There's going to be some... Look, I give Copeland... I don't know if it was Copeland, Christian Cage, or anyone else but that came up with it, but Copeland's penchant for really creative spots and anything goes brawls is incredible. Like the spot where he's looking for Christian Cage, you see a bunch of women running by and you see Christian Cage is hiding in the women's restroom. That is hilarious. And
yes.
I would not be surprised if we get some really, really fun, unique spots between Cope and Mox.
Christian is somebody I do not want all elderly wrestling applied to Christian. I want more Christian. I want, just find something for him almost every week.
If Christian's not on screen, everybody should be talking about Christian.
He has been gold. This has been a great run for him. Yeah. Okay. Did they do enough in selling Mariah and Tony? This is sad because we didn't talk about Mariah and Tony, and that could. Well, I'll read the question. Did they do enough in selling Mariah and Tony for the women's title at Grand Slam tonight? If it is indeed going to main event the show, is it going to main event the show Saturday? Should it? And does tonight make you less confident, or is it more just a logistical travel thing? And they had to, please the crowd by focusing on people who were there.
I mean, I definitely did notice that, it seemed like, all right, the two marquee matches up until now, they seem like they consider that all right, those are done deals. We've done all we really need to do with that, which was Omega and Ospreay versus the Callis family and Tony versus Mariah. We got some backstage promos. We got a hype package, but they're all right, we've said what we need to say. Let's get these guys to Australia. That's it. So, okay, sure. And I kind of get it. I think that there is a point, and I think WWE's been guilty of this for certain singles feuds where there's a couple of weeks before the pay-per-view where you're just all right, we've really said all we need to say and everything else is just kind of to remind the audience where we are in the story. I do think this deserves to main event. Will it? Just because of the hierarchy of titles right now, it's a toss-up. I think Omega, Ospreay, Don Callis, Tony, Mariah, and Cope and the Brisbane Brawl all have, a case to main event. I think that Tony versus Mariah, just based on, how long it's been built, it's a homecoming
it's actually
for Tony
for the
Storm.
title. It's for the major
title. I think it deserves to main event. It would also be a huge statement that, with all these marquee matches, all these big players, the women's title main events, that's a statement for the women's division that I think would be good for AEW. So I think it deserves that spot.
So Zach Barber super chatted and said, I have to shout out to Mariah May. Her promo was short but effective. I cannot wait for that match. What did you think of Mariah's promo? I want to go back and rewatch it because it felt like it was consciously addressing some of the things that were rightfully criticized about how she sold Toni Storm's reveal. There's been tons of conversation and debate about the timing of Tony's reveal and did they rush it on the calendar. I talked in depth with Zach Hadorn on the flagship this week about it. We spent half hour, give or take, on that match and the build. And I had I threw an idea out there for illustrative purposes, not because it's the ultimate way to do it, but illustratively, it was an example of how this could have played out in a way where it would have made all the time of Toni Storm's deception make sense, which is she had to lull Mariah May into looking down at Toni Storm as not a threat because she's crazy, wacky, and not a threat. And then after she agreed to give her a title shot, the contract signed, that's when Toni did the reveal that this is a game and I'm conscious of what I'm doing. But the way it happened, it didn't really have a punch. And then Mariah didn't sell it. She just blew it off. She acted rattled for a second, maybe. And then was like, I'm still the same badass I always was. You did nothing. Well, why did we do all this? So I thought the promo tonight, I want to rewatch it. It felt like it was trying to kind of address that a little bit. And as Zach said, it was short but effective. If it's the main event Saturday, it was almost too short. It didn't feel like that was the main event. It feels now like Moxley and Copeland and their tag match is going to be the main event. But yeah. So your thoughts?
I mean, it sold Mariah as like desperate almost to move on from the legacy of Timeless Toni Storm, saying like, you are nuts. That's it. I'm sick of hearing you. Like, I'm sick of my reign being about you. And all right, like I'm ready to stomp your head in. Like I got the viciousness, I got the little bit of her being unnerved, and I got the anger towards Toni. So, I was like, it did what it needed to do. It's competent. It didn't go overboard. And I'd much rather something be a little too minimalist than try and address every single fault.
Yeah.
And cram all that in.
And Zach points out she sold last week, for crying out loud. He's frustrated. Yeah. My point
I gotta
is
go rewatch it. Yeah.
Yeah. My point is that angle, the reveal was the big climactic moment, and that had to make sense when it happened. And the immediate follow-up needed to frame it. And if you're trying to make up for lost ground because the timing of the reveal and Mariah's first response to it took all the wind out of it, you can say, oh, but you're ignoring what happened since then. It's like, well, you're trying to catch. You fumbled the ball badly.
It was salvaged. I'll agree with Zach. It was salvaged, but that moment was nowhere near what it could and should have been for the story.
And I don't think salvaged, are you implying they made up all the lost ground and then some? Or are you saying they realized something was lost and they're trying to make up for some lost ground?
I think they're almost at the place they would have been if the reveal had been more clear. I just think they lost out on a very big, punchy moment because of it. But yeah. I don't think anything's really been lost, but yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't think I did think they got back less than you are saying, but I think it's to their credit that I think they've taken into account. Ooh, yeah, there was a lot more to work with here than we took advantage of. Let's now start doing that in the lead up to the match. I expected more tonight to help to build that match if it's going to main event, but where was it in the chat? It's being framed now as let's see. Darian Strachan says, given the new Instagram graphic from AEW, Mariah May versus Toni Storm is main eventing.
There we go.
I think it should. Yep, I think it should. So yeah, and Zach says if you recover your fumble and score 3 plays later, you still scored. My argument is I'm not saying they scored yet. I don't think they have scored to use a football analogy. But like I'm saying, I thought tonight's promo was continue on the continuum of oops, now let's fix this. And they have a lot of material to work with there. So they're explaining something that should have been just felt by the audience with better timing. Cool. Okay. Finally, Bruce Lee, PhD. We'll just stop after this. He goes, hey, Wade and Taj, I'm emailing about the ironically named Death Riders. First, I really had no interest in that Trios Championship match. Was it a good match? Yeah. I just didn't care. Great even. I just didn't care. Not only have the challengers just seemed uncool for a while now, but how am I supposed to take the Death Rider seriously when it took 3 of them to beat the 888-year-old Jeff Jarrett? I'm sure you also love Cesaro's pin breakup when he double stomped on Strong, which looked like he reinforced the pin on his own teammate. He sent this in hours ago. He sent this
your people know you well. Your people know you well.
Yes. He sent it in.
You're consistent.
He sent it in during Dynamite. So, if the evidence is there and people are seeing it, the fact that I pointed it out doesn't mean it's not true. It's just you can't unsee it now. So you're stuck.
No, of course. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Well, I don't think that's sincere, but we'll see.
No, completely sincere.
I know I would. So, second, aside from the backwards fact that faces are committing theft, their mystique, or what is left of it to me, was further eroded by said theft by midlife crisis Copeland and Jay White. And you know my thoughts on how badly they've mishandled White from the moment he signed. Now, maybe they do something between now and the end of the show. I'm emailing after the Joe Shibata hook swash. But yeah, just not what I would call a good night thus far for the Death Riders and AEW booking overall, though I did get a kick out of Hanger. So yeah, he didn't see the end of the show. So, I'm curious what Bruce thinks of what they did, at the end of it. I mean, I thought it made the match feel more than it.
No, it was a pretty good go home angle in terms of like making this feel bigger than it was before. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that my just logic critique would be, Mox going, I'm going to break your neck, Copeland. And so I'll give you a title match so I can break your neck in the title match. When you have a tag match coming up Saturday, why gift him what he wanted in a title match when you have a chance Saturday to break his neck? It felt like, to me, they're just trying to promote the pay-per-view, but I felt they did it a week early. They didn't. Something should have happened Saturday that led to Mox giving him a title match rather than just, you stole my property and you made a point, so now I'm going to give you a reason that doesn't really hold water to give you a title shot in my moment of being frustrated and flustered. But the fact that we know those two are fighting for a title means the tag match takes on new gravitas, and I think that was the ultimate, the ultimate reason.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of how you frame Bruce's comment about the pin breakup, Kyle Fassel goes, every time I hear someone say bitch, I think of Wade's bitchometer now. So there you are. All right. Tage, thanks. Been fun. We
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me.
We had a spirited AEW post show here. I love it. Final plug for VIP. We'll just close with the graphic on the screen for our YouTube viewers, and I'll read for our audio listeners. Your chance to go VIP. Unlock 35, almost 40 years of archives. Coupon code is 2025 save 10. 2025 save 10. And that gets you $10 off a 1 month, a 3 month, or an annual subscription. PWTorch.com/GoVIP tells you all about VIP membership and has a link to the sign-up form. If you are looking at us on YouTube, you can point your phone at the QR code. That'll take you right to the sign-up page. And then enter coupon code 2025 save 10. We take credit card, debit card, PayPal for the full VIP membership option. That includes an ad-free website, Apple Podcast compatibility with a single click, compatibility with other popular podcast apps on iOS and Android. You can also stream the shows directly from our mobile app and our desktop app, which are handsome and clutter-free without ads. And it also gives you access to over 120 conversations and interviews and podcasts I've had with ex-WWE creative team members and our 22 years of Royal Rumble post shows, which can also be subscribed to as an RSS feed with a valid VIP membership. So you can have 22 Royal Rumble post shows accessible on your phone to march through either forward or backward or go to your favorite events. Many more benefits, many more perks. Skip the commercials on these free shows and get VIP exclusives and the weekly newsletter. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Coupon code 2025 save 10. Thanks everybody. Thanks to Brian Zillum. Thanks to Tage. Thanks to all the emailers, chat room interaction. It's been fun. It's been great. And we will talk to you all next time.